Hey bitches, here it's me again. That guy who makes dumbass George Washington videos that no one watches. Anyways, I've got something special planned for you guys this time. Remember that game collection video I made back in April, where I showed off all the games and consoles I owned? Well, guess what? We're doing it again. Shut the fuck up, lol. Yeah, sure, I already did a video about this, but trust me, it's not gonna be the exact same. Since April, I've gotten tons more games, and some opinions have changed. So shut the actual fuck up or else I'm gonna fall. Anyways, here I'm gonna go over the games in my collection and give my opinions on most of them, but not all. So off we go, to my other house. Good lord, finally I'm here. That took forever. Anyway, let's go in hall. Alright, here we are. As you can see, I've got a ton of stuff to go over, so let's get started. Like last time, I'll do it by console. Okay then, let's get this shit started.
Oh, we're doing this again? I have a bag of confetti saved up.
To start this whole thing off, I've got the Atari 2600. I don't have too many games for this one, so I'll keep this brief. Since April, I haven't picked up anything new for this system. The only games I own for it are the same ones I picked up along with it back in spring of last year. As you can see here, I've got a ton of arcade ports and combat, but not any of the more popular stuff like the Pitfall games. I would like to get more someday, but I'd rather collect for other systems instead. Oh yeah, and the controller is still fucking weird, lol. Next console. And here we have the myth, the legend itself, a Nintendo Entertainment System. It's easily the best 8-bit console released, at least in my opinion, and it's got some really good games in its library. It's actually the system that got me into collecting when I found it at a garage sale. While I don't collect for it much these days, I still do from time to time. Anyways, starting off, we've got the original Super Mario Bros., a good place to start for sure. This is easily one of the most iconic games released for the console, and for good reason. Sure, the hit point system is somewhat punishing, the stages are kind of basic, and it's pretty short, being beatable in under 30 minutes, but I still enjoy myself every time I revisit this one. It's far from my favorite in the series, sure, but that doesn't really matter, it's still quite solid. Oh yeah, and Duck Hunts in the cartridge too, lol. That's a fun little arcade game. That's really it. Next is Super Mario Bros. 2. This is way worse than the first one there, I said it. Okay, maybe that's being kind of harsh, it really isn't that bad, but I have a lot of issues with it. The camera is kind of crap, the control isn't as good, and the continues are limited, there isn't a continue code like in Mario 1. It's not a bad game, but it's definitely one of my lesser favorite Mario games ever made. Oh yeah, and
Super Mario Brothers 2 again, baby! Oh, it's still the king after all these years.
Anyways, next up we have Super Mario Bros. 3, the last Mario game released for the NES, and good lord, it shows. This is easily the best Mario game released for the system, bar none. Sure, Mario 1 was good, but this is when Mario truly reached legendary status. Everything from the better control to the more forgiving hit point system to the more detailed graphics to the soundtrack to the much improved stage designs, it's just awesome and is easily one of my favorites in the series. Sure, there's no in-level checkpoints and the stages are the shortest in the franchise, but I don't mind, because everything else is kick-fucking ass. Undoubtedly the best NES game ever made. Next up, we have Mega Man 2. I haven't played many Mega Man games, but the ones I have are generally pretty good. So far, I haven't tried Mega Man 2 yet, but I'm planning on it. It looks pretty enjoyable to me, but I'm not setting my expectations too high, because it could end up being a huge disappointment. Still, I'm looking forward to it. And next is Tetris, the word this voice can't seem to pronounce for some fucking reason. Anyways, yeah, this game is pretty simple, but a fun time waster. I haven't played it in a long time, because I'd rather focus on more in-depth experiences. Still, this is something that I do like. But that's not all the NES games I have. I keep a bunch of them stored in this crappy drawer thing too. This bunch is a pretty mixed bag. Some games are good, others are pretty shitty. I kind of glossed over most of them last time, so why not go into greater detail this time? Here we have Tengen Pac-Man, which kind of sucks, Monster Party, which really fucking sucks, and then Jaws and Narc, which are both really fucking boring and no fun at all. After that, we've got Top Gun, which is actual revolting garbage, Dig Dug 2, which is surprisingly not that bad, Ghostbusters, which is one of the most monotonous games I've ever played, and RoboCop, which is boring but not that terrible functionally speaking. Next is 1943 and Nintendo World Cup. 1943 is a pretty decent top-down shoot-'em-up, while Nintendo World Cup is pretty uninteresting to me. I mean, it's soccer. I don't give a shit about that. And finally, we have the unbelievably god-awful, revolting pile of trash that is Top Gun Second Mission. Seriously, this game is fucking terrible and I hate it. It creates a new meaning of the word boring. But, while bad, it doesn't actively anger me, so it's more so in an I don't care kind of way. And that does it for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a pretty good console, but far from my favorite. Next we have the Sega Genesis, the console that turned Sega into a household name. Fittingly, it was the first Sega console I collected for, and it was definitely a great place to start. First, we have the most iconic game released for the console, Sonic the Hedgehog. If I'm honest, this is one of the weaker games in the series, but it's still decent at worst. It controls well and is pretty fun to come back to time, but I think future entries improved in it by quite a bit. Speaking of future entries, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This game is a huge improvement over the first, featuring much better stage design, music, graphics, and more interesting level settings. Sure, the camera still needs some fine-tuning and the limited continues were unnecessary, but those flaws don't ruin the game. Overall, Sonic 2 is a great sequel, but the formula still wasn't quite perfected yet. And that's where Sonic 3 and Knuckles comes in. No, not just Sonic 3, not just Sonic and Knuckles, the full game Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This is easily the best Sonic game in the Genesis, featuring the best level design, graphics, and music of the trilogy, the most content of the three, and, of course, the excellent addition of a save feature, thank God. This game gets my vote for the best Sega Genesis game, and I simply can't get enough of it. It's just so fucking good. However, even with all that, it's not my favorite Sonic game overall. What is? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. Next up is Earthworm Jim. I haven't beaten this game yet, but I swear I will someday. As is, I don't think it's much better than decent. It controls well and plays just fine, but the camera is really dog shit in some instances, and there's an assload of alternate gameplay styles that don't gel well with one another, making the game come off as somewhat unfocused. I don't mind alternate play styles in themselves, but in a platformer, I would like them to involve, platforming. Still, no, this game isn't bad, I just feel somewhat conflicted about it. Next is the Mortal Kombat trilogy. The only one I've played so far is the first one, and to be honest, I don't really like it that much. I'm not the biggest fighting game fan to begin with, and this is no exception. I thought it was really boring, but then again I played it single player, so that's probably why. Their graphics are also rather ugly. Sure, it was revolutionary at the time to have characters that looked like real people, but these days, the sprites and graphics don't look very appealing at all. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I hate these games, they are just not my thing. And like the NES, that's not all of my Genesis games. I still have a bunch more in the drawers. So, why not go through all of them quickly too? I haven't played any of these, but I want to someday. Here we have Altered Beast, which I've heard is pretty decent, Cliffhanger, which is apparently bad, The Art of Fighting, a game I know absolutely nothing about, Jurassic Park Rampage Edition, which looks pretty crappy, Riddick Boxing or whatever the hell it's called, I don't give a shit, and Jack and the Forever Man, which is a game I've heard is hard as fuck. Most of these seem pretty shitty, but a couple seem alright. I won't know until I experience them for myself. In addition to those, I have this Shinobi game that I know absolutely nothing about, so that's cool like that. And the last in these drawers is WWF Raw, made by the Lords of Ass, the gods of shit, laughing joking numbnuts themselves. LJN, and yeah, this is definitely an LJN game, pretty crappy and not worth playing in the slightest. But that's still not all my Genesis games. Up here, I keep some assorted games, and that includes a couple Genesis titles. These two are both Disney games, Disney's Aladdin, which I've heard good things about, and The Lion King, which is apparently really obnoxious and poorly designed. I haven't played either, but I do plan on doing so sometime down the road. And that does it for the Sega Genesis. Overall, this console is awesome, but I mostly like it for the Sonic games. Those aren't the only good games for the console, but they are the main games I play on it. I do want to continue collecting for Genesis, but not right now. Next up in the menu is the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo's entry into 16-bit gaming. This console is easily my favorite of the 16-bit generation, featuring the best games, graphics, and, usually, music of the general. I just love this thing so much. And we're starting off with the best of the best, Super Mario World. Somehow, they managed to top Super Mario Bros. 3. This game is not only my favorite 2D Mario game, not only my personal favorite SNES game, but it's my favorite 2D side-scroller in general. I just love everything about it, the charming visuals, the music, the best control and stage design in any 2D Mario game, and the fun progression system that lets you take multiple paths through the world map. Oh yeah, and Yoshi. Sure, it brings back the Mario 1 hit point system, and you can only save after clearing a Switch Palace, Ghost House, Fortress, or Castle, but I really don't care about those things when the game is as fun as it is. While it's also not my favorite Mario game, I love the shit out of it and can play it again at a moment's notice. Next up is Super Mario All-Stars, and the variant that released later on, Super Mario All-Stars Plus World. I own both for some reason. Whatever, moving on. Super Mario All-Stars is the best game to feature Mario and All-Stars in the title. Unlike certain other compilations with a similar name, this one isn't a collection of lazy, half-assed emulations of the NES titles. These are fully fledged remasters with updated visuals and music. I generally prefer the music on the NES versions for being more catchy, but the new graphics are a huge plus and breathe new life into the aging environments of the older games. As for the games themselves, they are pretty much unchanged, except now you have a save feature that allows you to continue from the beginning of the world you saved in. Still, this collection isn't all sunshine and rainbows, because it includes Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Lost Levels is a horrible game with bullshit level design and stage gimmicks that seem to exist only to fuck you over constantly. I really hate Lost Levels and consider it the worst Mario game by far. However, that's a minor downside, because the other games included are still fantastic. If you get a version of this collection, get the one with Mario World included, since that's the definitive version of that game. Next we have the Donkey Kong Country Trilogy, which I consider the second best platforming series for the console. The first game is pretty damn good, but I find that it suffers from occasional camera issues. The second game, Diddy's Conquest, in the other hand, is stellar stuff. Easily the best game in the trilogy. It has fun gameplay, a perfect tough but fair level of challenge, a great soundtrack, and is the best looking game for the console by far. Unfortunately, the trilogy doesn't really stick the landing, because the third game, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, isn't very good in my opinion. Well, at least the SNES original isn't. This version of the game is fairly boring, and features some really tedious stage gimmicks, especially Coin Dozer Clamber. The music is also the weakest in the trilogy. As a game, I think it's rather mediocre, which really sucks considering how great the first two were. After that, we've got Mega Man X, obviously the first game in the Mega Man X sub-series. Last time, I said this was my favorite in the series, and even after playing several other Mega Man games, that still holds true. I don't really know what to say other than this game fucking rocks. Quite literally, since the soundtrack is so kick-ass. In fact, I'd say it's my favorite soundtrack from an SNES game. You're listening to a track from it right now, as a matter of fact. The music isn't the only strength, however, as the controls are buttery smooth, the levels are fun, challenging, and never annoying. The colors are enjoyable to hunt down, although I would prefer having all my health from the start, but that's just me. And the graphics, while somewhat dated, are still appealing. Yeah, some bosses can be easily chased with their weakness, and you will have some backtracking for items if you don't follow a specific boss order, but I don't get too hung up on these things. Overall, I quite like Mega Man X and consider it one of the best games for the SNES. Next is Kirby Superstar, which is the only Kirby game I currently own. I'll be upfront with you, I barely played any of this game ever since I got my hands in it last year. From what I've experienced, it controls well, has great music, good stage design, and Kirby has some interesting abilities, notably the copy ability. Overall, this game made a positive first impression, but I'll have to play more of it to get a complete opinion on it. Next up, Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. This is yet another solid SNES game, but I think it's a little overhyped. For what it's worth, the music is great, the graphics are fantastic, the control is solid, and it's generally well made. Unfortunately, a few of the later levels start to get brutally difficult to a ludicrous degree. Don't get me wrong, I like challenging games, but this game takes it way too far in these occasional circumstances. I think the main issue that causes these difficulty spikes is the camera, which can be pretty bad sometimes, and when combined with platforms that move almost as fast as Sonic. Yeah, these instances really got on my nerves. The final boss is also pretty frustrating because of the bottomless pits and unreliable giant egg throwing. In spite of all this crap, I still like Yoshi's Island. I just consider it very flawed and feel like some people tend to overlook these flaws for whatever reason. Next is Super Castlevania 4. Wow, holy shit, I didn't pronounce it as Castlevania this time, holy shit, I meant to. Anyways, here I don't have much to say about this one. I barely played it, the furthest I've gotten is the second level. I do enjoy it so far, but it's not nearly as fun as most other platformers of the era because of its somewhat slower pace. One huge highlight is the music, which is one of the best SNES soundtracks, and the controls, which are smooth as hell. Trust me, I will finish this one someday, just not now. Next, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I don't give a shit about Zelda, moving on. Okay, not actually, I am somewhat interested in A Link to the Past. The Legend of Zelda series doesn't look like something I would particularly enjoy, but this game sticks out to me as something I probably would. The other games in the series suffer from slow, boring, uninteresting gameplay from the one other game I've played. Yeah, maybe I should play more, but something about this one just jumps out to me and I'm not sure what it is. I'll get to this one sometime too, but like Castlevania, I'd rather play other things right now. Next is Star Fox, the first game in the Star Fox franchise and one of the earliest and most famous uses of the Super FX chip, a chip Yoshi's Island also used, in fact. It allows the rendering of 3D graphics, and they look pretty goddamn primitive. I get that this was one of the first 3D games, but these graphics are simply ugly and unappealing by today's standards. I do like the R-Wing models, but that's about it. The frame rate is also total dog shit, having less frames per second than an epileptic photographer. The control is also slippery and the difficulty is increased because of these things. I said I enjoyed this game before, but after thinking about it a bit, I'm not so sure about that. By my definition, this is far too flawed for me to consider it a good game. I don't outright hate it, I just don't find it that funny and will never agree with anyone who says it's better than the next game in the series. I'll give it this. The soundtrack is an absolute banger. And then we have Super Metroid. This is one I've been meaning to play for a long time, because it controls decently enough and the exploration seems fun for what it is. Only one problem, my cartridge has a dead save battery. Sure, I could try to replace it myself or have a professional do it, but first of all, I don't know any professionals who could, nor do I want to spend the money on that, and I have no experience with that level of maintenance, so fuck that. I wish I could play it on real hardware right now, but it seems like I'll have to resort to emulation. Or, never mind, I'll talk about that later. I'll play this one someday, mark my fucking words. But that's still not all my SNES games. Like the Genesis, I keep a bunch of them in the drawers and in the top shelf. Let's look at them, starting with the drawers. Most of this shit fucking sucks, so buckle your fuckle, cause we are going in dry. First, John Madden Football 1993. I don't care. And who the hell is Miles? Hey, fuck it. Next, Madden 94 no one cares. Next, Madden 95 no one cares. Next, WrestleMania the arcade game. This isn't a bad Mortal Kombat clone, only one problem, it's a Mortal Kombat clone, so I don't give a shit about it. Next game. Next is Doom Troopers. Oh shit, is this a Doom game? No it isn't, it's just a shitty side-scroller. It blows ass and isn't fun at all. Next. Next is NHL 95 no one cares. Next is Riddick Bow Boxing no one cares. Next is WWF Royal Rumble no one cares. Next is Super High Impact no one cares. Next is WWF WrestleMania no one cares. Next is Bill Walsh College Football no one cares. Did I mention I don't give a shit about sports games? I don't give a shit about sports games. Next up is...
Oh shit! I know that, bitch!
Why the hell do I own this for both consoles? You know what, fuck it, let's move on.
Oh, what the fuck?
Anyways, next up we have Revolution X featuring Aerosmith. This is some crappy arcade shooter that isn't any fun. Okay, moving on. Next, SimCity. It's a simulation game in the SNES. Yep, it's about as boring as it sounds. Apparently this was supposed to be solid, but I don't like it because it's so fucking tedious and unfun. Next, Wing Commander. This game is utter tripe. It's a visual novel-like experience that's boring as all hell. I don't think the story is engaging at all, and I dropped it almost immediately. But we're still not done with the SNES yet. In the top of my shelf, I've got a couple more games. First up is Super Star Wars, which is a surprisingly decent run and gun from what I played. I haven't even tried beating it, because it's extremely brutal, even on easy mode, but maybe I'll give this one another shot one day. And finally, we have Mario Paint. This is a fun little game to sit back, relax, and play every now and then, but it doesn't really offer that much beyond essentially being an S-Paint for the SNES. And that's finally it for my SNES collection. Half is some of the best games I've ever played, and the other half is kind of shit. But I don't care, I still love this system and the great games really are fucking great. I'll definitely be actively collecting for this system for many years to come. Coming up next, we've got the Nintendo 64, Nintendo's entryway into 3D gaming and their 5th generation console. And let me tell you, they pulled it off very well. I love the N64, and it's got some great games on it. Of course, where's a better place to start than the console's landmark launch title, Super Mario 64, the plumber's first 3D game, and quite possibly the first collectathon platformer ever made. Tons of people in the internet will claim that this game has aged poorly or something, and to them I say, what the actual fuck? This game has aged just fine in my eyes, and in fact I'd say it holds up better than pretty much every other 5th gen game, especially those from the PlayStation. The thing I love so much about it is its controlling wide moveset. Just the simple act of running around and jumping is satisfying in itself, which I think is absolutely necessary for a good 3D platformer. All of these moves are in service of some great stage design that, while not the tightest in the world, is loads of fun to run around in and find the stars as quickly and optimally as you can. Let's just say there's a reason why this is the most iconic speedrun game of all time. Not only that, but the music is godlike, being one of my top favorite Mario soundtracks, especially that Wing Cap theme. Good god, that song is masterful, and while the visuals definitely look dated, they don't look much worse than most other games of the time, and I actually think the dreamlike aesthetic is quite appealing. It's also one of the most replayable games I've ever seen in my life. Overall, Super Mario 64 is awesome and I can't get enough of it. It's easily one of my absolute favorites in the Mario series for sure. Don't listen to slack-jawed neckbeard Redditor critics who think they are hot shit. This game is great and I will forever defend it. Next up, we've got Banjo-Kazooie, a game that made the collectathon subgenre popular. Truth be told, I still prefer Mario 64 because of its faster pace and the more acrobatic focus of its moveset, but I quite like Banjo too. Just because something isn't my preference doesn't automatically mean it's bad, and that's certainly the case here. Banjo controls incredibly smooth, the levels are the perfect size, not too small to become boring, but not too large to become confusing to navigate. The music is a joy to listen to, and it's easily one of the most visually impressive titles in the console. Yep, the frame rate can be choppy, the camera can be unhelpful at times, and the music notes not being permanent colored can make them very stressful to collect. If you die, you have to collect them all over again, but the game is so much fun that I find it hard to care. This is one of the best N64 games without a doubt. Next is Star Fox 64. I hinted at the next game when I talked about the SNES Star Fox game, and this is what I was talking about. Star Fox 64 is such a huge step up from the SNES one, it's not even funny. I genuinely have no idea how anyone can prefer the SNES entry over this one, to be honest. It controls far better, the frame rate is actually not terrible, the graphics aren't nearly as ugly, though they are still kind of dated in their own, and the stages don't seem to throw as much nearly unavoidable crap in your way. The only strength that the original has over 64 is the music, which I actually do think is a step down in 64. Otherwise, Star Fox 64 is actually quite good, even if I absolutely suck at it. I've only ever beaten the easy path lol. Next we've got Paper Mario. This is one of the few N64 titles I played as a kid, the others being Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, and Super Smash Bros. I had it on another system we'll discuss later, and I remember playing it with my brother all the goddamn time. I haven't played it much recently, though, because I'd rather focus on other games at the moment. Still, from what I've played, it's shaping up to be even better than I remember it being, like Super Mario 64. I'm not super interested in RPG games, but something about the Mario RPGs just gels with me in a way the mainstream genre just doesn't. I'll play further some other time, but for now it's just gonna stay in my backlog. And next up, we've got Diddy Kong Racing, another Rareware title. If I'm honest, I sort of think Rare's output in the N64 is somewhat overrated. Don't get me wrong, though, when they made something good, it really was fucking good. Like I said earlier, I liked Banjo-Kazooie a lot, but I unfortunately haven't played Diddy Kong Racing that much. I've heard nothing but positivity, with some even calling it better than Mario Kart 64, so I really want to play it sometime. I love a good racing game, and I'm sure this will be no exception. One day, Diddy Kong Racing, one day. And as usual, we're not quite done with the N64 just yet. I still have several games left to go over. First of these games is Mario Kart 64. Truthfully, while I do enjoy it, I consider it more of a guilty pleasure and don't think it's actually an objectively good game, just a decent one. The controls are touchy and the graphics don't look that great, but the music is truly great and it can be some dumb fun. Still, this isn't winning any awards when it comes to racing games. Next is Rocket Robot on Wheels. I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, but I didn't think it was very good. I thought the controls were pretty bad, the turning is too slow, and it's slippery and imprecise. I can't even begin to count the amount of times I fell off of platforms because of how slippery the controls are. The missions are also awful, with stupid concepts like playing an annoying tic-tac-toe game with a chicken, feeding apples to president heads, and racing a car with an extremely poorly controlling vehicle. Yep, because these are the things I wanted to do in this platformer. They also took something as cool as building your own roller coaster and managed to make it into one of the most soul-suckingly boring experiences of all time. So congrats. Wait, Sucker Punch? Sucker Punch made this game? The same guys who made Sly Cooper? Wow. Gotta start somewhere, I guess. Overall, this game is a disaster and I didn't even make it out of the first level because I was so bored and frustrated knowing I blew $40 in this stripe. I could play more of it and things could change, but for now, I don't like it. Speaking of disliking popular games, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This game is constantly plastered with perfect 10s across the board, and while I understand why many people love it so much, I'm not personally one of them. The unbearably slow text speed, which you can't skip, by the way, alone makes it a chore, but the graphics are ugly and the controls aren't even particularly great. Oh, not bad. Like I said, oh, it's not like the game is awful or anything, it's just not my cup of tea. What is more my cup of tea is Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, another collectathon platformer. However, the N64 version is not the best version for a few reasons, most notably its weaker MIDI soundtrack and horizontal acrobat pulls being nearly broken from how unresponsive they are. Still, this isn't bad in N64, I'd just say stick with the PlayStation version. I'll offer my more in-depth impressions on this game when we get to it, but for now, all you need to know is that the N64 version is alright. Not great, not terrible, but perfectly acceptable. Next, Banjo-Tooie. Like Rocket, sorry if you like this game, but I just didn't. I didn't even make it out of the first level because its boring, convoluted nature turned me off that much. It's a complete betrayal of what I enjoyed about the first Banjo levels that weren't loaded with overly long and tedious missions and way too many items to collect. While the graphics are a little prettier, this comes at the cost of the worst frame rate I had ever seen on the N64. It actually drops to SNES Star Fox levels, it's so bad. Overall, this game is an incoherent, bloated mess that crumbles under its own overambition, leaving you with a boring husk of a game that's absolutely no fun whatsoever. But that's still not all. I've got a few more stored in my junk drawers. First is GoldenEye 007. One of the most iconic Rareware games for the N64. It's fucking dog shit. Yeah, I really dislike GoldenEye. It controls like shit, looks like shit, plays like shit, and has nothing going for it gameplay-wise. The music is pretty good, but that doesn't mean much when the gameplay is the train wreck that it is. Next is 007 The World Is Not Enough. This game looks better than GoldenEye, but it still doesn't play very well, and I'm pretty sure it will be more of the same shit. Next is NFL Blitz 2001. No one cares, and that does it for the N64. Despite ending on a negative note, I really do like this console and most of its games. It's easily my favorite 5th generation console, and I really am glad to call it for it. Next in line is the Sony PlayStation, the first game console that Sony ever made. It's not my favorite console from this generation of games, but I think it's great, and the stuff I've played in it generally ranges from pretty good to outright great. I don't actually own an original PlayStation, but I still call it for it. Why is that? You can probably tell why, but if not, you'll see. Anyway, to start off, let's look at Spyro the Dragon, released in 1998. This was the game that proved that the PlayStation could not only have a collectathon platformer, but that it could also do it well. I like Spyro 1 well enough, and I like its visuals, music, and its set of levels are pretty well done, but the controls are a little bit clunky, a lot of the enemies are really obnoxious, and the boss fights can't be called boss fights, because they are far too easy. This game is probably my least favorite in this trilogy because of these reasons, as they make it come off as messier than the other two, but I still really do enjoy it. Next, Spyro to Ripto's Rage, or Gateway to Glimmer, if you're from a different region. This game is a big improvement over the last one for various reasons, including more detailed graphics and more catchy music. The biggest sticking point for me, though, is definitely the controls. These are such an improvement over the original, and everything from the more tight turning to the addition of the hover move makes this a much better game to play than the original. My only real complaints are the poorly written story, which is bad even by collectathon standards, and the frequent in-level and between-level backtracking. The stage distribution among the 3 hub worlds is also really lopsided, with the second hub, Autumn Plains, having the most by far at 12 stages, while the others only have something like 7 or 8. It's weird. Still, I liked Spyro 2 quite a bit overall. Next up we have Spyro Year of the Dragon, the final Spyro game released on the original PlayStation, and the last in the series to be developed by Insomniac Games. They really went out with a bang, because this game is easily my favorite Spyro game. It carries over the same improved controls from the last game, and features the best levels in the trilogy. In addition to the typical Spyro gameplay, which is the best it's ever been, Spyro 3 also includes a few alternate characters with different playstyles. I like pretty much all of these, because most involve platforming, and even the ones that don't are pretty fun. It also has the best graphics and music of the trilogy, and the story is the only one from the whole series that I can actually call good, with entertaining characters, great voice acting, and a plot that isn't filled with holes and forced plot points. My only true complaint is the existence of backtracking, but even that's better justified than in the last game. Overall, this game is one of the best collectathons I've ever played and gets my vote for the best original PlayStation game. Next up, Mega Man X4. This was the Mega Man game I played after the first X, because I skipped over X2 and X3 for whatever reason. That doesn't really matter much, though, because X4 is pretty good all in its own. It has some of the best control in a side-scroller. The armor upgrades are the best in the series, especially the head part, which gives you infinite secondary weapon ammo, and fun bosses, provided you don't use their weaknesses. However, I think its greatest strength is the level design itself. It's probably the strongest in the X series overall, featuring the best balance between platforming and combat the series has ever seen. Still, I prefer X1 for a few reasons, most notably the music and bosses that, usually, don't completely fall apart with their weaknesses. I also find that X1 has a lot more replay value. X4 also has a fucking horrendous final boss. The first two phases are just fine, but the third phase is where I have a bone to pick. It is one of the worst difficulty spikes I have ever played in my life. It features bullshit attacks that are almost unavoidable, and the whole thing is based on RNG, so you have to hope you get the attacks that let you deal damage to Sigma or else you're fucked. I spent 4 hours in this boss, and it was absolutely miserable. It's a shame that the game makes a horrendous lasting impression, because pretty much everything else leading up to the final boss was great. The perfect way to describe it would be a delicious cake that spontaneously turns into dog shit in the last bite. It's good, but not my favorite. Next, Pac-Man World. I haven't played very much of this one at all, but I have experienced enough to say that the sequel is better. I find this game's controls to be a little stiff and the stages themselves are fairly basic and aren't as interesting, but don't take that as me disliking it. I don't, because the controls are functional, it looks decent for a PlayStation, and it is pretty decent fun. I just think the next game is a lot better. Come on, you son of a bitch, get in there, come on, get in your spot again, come on. Why the hell, oh there we go. Anyways, next up is Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Yep, I own both the N64 and PS1 versions, so stop looking at me like that. This version of the game is easily the definitive one, featuring the best music and the most technical polish, so let's talk about it more in depth, shall we? This game may seem like every other movie tie-in game from the time, which are notorious for being rushed, packed together garbage with no care from the developers at all, but trust me, this game is not that. It was developed by Traveler's Tales, most well known for the Lego games and a few Crash Bandicoot games, and they put in much more effort than I would have ever expected from one of these licensed games. It controls incredibly well, its levels are fun to explore, and collecting the Pizza Planet tokens is a good time. It also looks great for the console, and, again, really makes you feel like Batman. I mean a small toy in a human world. All the levels are designed as huge versions of standard places, and the sense of scale is impressive for the time. The music is also flat out great, with catchy tracks that make the game that much better. Sure, it's fairly easy, has some repetitive stage objectives, between level backtracking, and is somewhat lacking in depth compared to other collectathons, but I don't care. This game is a ton of fun, and is one of the best licensed games I've ever played. With that said, oh, it still isn't my absolute favorite licensed game. What is? You'll have to wait and see. In addition to those games, I keep a few games up in the top of my shelf, alongside the other assorted stuff I've been showing you. Those games are these three, the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. Those games are fucking dog shit. No, I'm not joking. No, this is not clickbait. I'm being 100% genuine. When I say this, I think the PS1 Crash Bandicoot games are awful, broken games that have no appeal to me whatsoever. I went in hoping for something as good as other platformers I've played, but came out filled with nothing but burning hatred towards these horrendous pieces of digital rubbish. Let's start at the top, why don't we? Crash Bandicoot, released in 1996. Fuck this game. It controls like shit, the music is forgettable shit, the level design is shit, because it works against the horrendous controls and is not interesting in the slightest. The performance is shit, sometimes the game actually locks up, because you fall too far too quickly, and is overall just shit. It has a promising start, but that quickly fades, as you're left with a soul-suckingly boring and occasionally infuriating dumpster fire of an experience with no appeal in the slightest. The strike doesn't even come within spitting distance of its contemporary Super Mario 64, and I'm sure the only game released that year that would be worse would be Bubsy 3D, which I haven't played and don't plan on playing. Next, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. This is probably the least terrible game in the trilogy, but I still don't like what I played. The control, while better than the first game, is still not good. The music is the most forgettable in the series. I remember at least 2 tracks from the previous and next games. The level design is not engaging at all, and it got so boring that I dropped the game before making it too far. Sure, maybe I'm being unfair to it, because it's the one I've played the least, but with a first impression as tedious as this, can you really blame me? Still, I wouldn't call what I played so far bad, just painfully mediocre. And finally, I'm ready to burn some bridges, because this game, Crash Bandicoot Warped, is by far, unquestionably, the worst game in the series. It is truly terrible, and I have nothing but disdain and hatred towards it. What makes me hate it so much? Well, it's a little thing called fucking everything. To start, the music is as forgettable as ever, featuring only 2 tracks I can remember. However, that means nothing. The real problem is how torturously awful the gameplay itself is. The controls are still the same stiff, awkward, broken controls from the last game. Turning is a task in itself. Crashes jumps have no reach or momentum at all, and even the most basic up platforming is turned into a massive chore because of it. The level design ranges from the same mediocre shit from the last 2 entries to absolutely infuriatingly horrendous. Each successive one seems to get worse and worse than the last, throwing in more dog shit platforming and stage gimmicks that go entirely against the terrible controls, particularly the absolutely broken blackout basement type gimmick from the final stage. The enemy placement and camera are also some of the worst I've ever seen, with enemies that constantly surprise you from off-screen before you can react. Sure, the first 2 Genesis Sonic games and the first Donkey Kong Country occasionally fell into this trap, but they were still good games in spite, because it didn't happen nearly as often as in this garbage. But that's not all, because this game features several alternate gameplay styles, and spoiler alert, they are even worse than the standard Crash platforming, which was already revoltingly, disgustingly bad. These gameplay styles range from bad to unplayable. To begin, barely any of them have a single thing to do with platforming, which is what this game was advertised as. It's entirely unfocused. When I play a platformer, I want to do platforming. If you're gonna have alternate playstyles, I don't care if you add new combat mechanics or a different form of progression, just make sure they involve platforming, or at the very fucking least, make them fun. Crash Warped spectacularly fails at this, and none of the alternate playstyles are fun in the slightest. The jet skis are boring. The auto-running levels with Coco are based entirely on trial and error and require memorization to pass. The running towards the camera segments are the worst in the series, with bullshit hazard placement and an insufferably terrible camera. The water levels are the worst water stages I've ever played, with terrible visibility and sluggish, awful controls, and the plane levels are the worst flight stages I've ever played in a game. With unusably clunky flight controls, skew hit detection, your bullets often zip right through the enemy. Unless you're right on their asses, and enemies that unleash assaults capable of killing you within seconds, making these stages a stress test in frustration and attrition. But the worst is yet to come. Finally, we have the worst gameplay style I've ever played in a game, the digital amalgamation of pain and suffering, the unholy abomination, the driving stages. Fuck me with a cactus, these levels are flat out atrocious. They simply do not work. The control is the worst in the game, because the turning is broken, and the levels expect hairpin turns with pinpoint accuracy, if you want to stand a chance of winning. You also have to hit all the speed up panels, which make your turning even more stiff. That's just fucking great, isn't it? So great it makes me want to punch a goddamn hole in my wall. The bosses in this game are also total horse waste. They give you no health going in, and feature attacks you'll need clairvoyance to avoid successfully. The final boss is atrocious in particular, because it also gives you no health going in, and you have to avoid attacks that are only hard to dodge, because the camera zooms in when you walk too far towards the back wall, making it so you'll never be able to avoid its attacks successfully without some damage, something you can't afford, because it gives you no health going in. Okay, I get it, depth perception, but you could easily solve that by switching to a top-down camera angle when the attacks take place. Oh, and your reward for beating the game? A shitty non-ending that's essentially Naughty Dog saying, "Hey player, fuck you, now go get the colored gems by playing our shit game for longer." Yeah, well go fuck yourselves. Overall, this game is fucking terrible. It's an absolute abomination, a repulsive, putrid, petri dish of puke. Rarely do I ever play something as incompetent and bumbling as this absolute filth. The only thing that allowed me to keep my last snippet of sanity while suffering through this was the graphics, which do admittedly look nice for the PlayStation. Otherwise, this game is a dumpster fire of cyanide, potassium, and cesium, and its gameplay is akin to stabbing yourself in the eyes and liver with the sharp end of a claymore. It's insufferable, revolting, putrid ass grease, and it would be more fun to accidentally give yourself a steam burn. And while I wouldn't say this is the worst game of all time or anything, it is without the game I hate the most for getting absolutely nothing right. Jesus Christ, I need a beer or something, goddamn. And that's really it for this abominable trilogy. Overall, these 3 games make up my most dated game series of all time, because apart from their visuals and the occasional song that isn't a forgettable bore fest, they get nothing, not a single fucking thing right. Apparently, these games are beloved, and I will never understand why, because I think they are utterly repugnant trash with no meaningful redeeming qualities at all. If I ever have to play these games again, it will be too fucking soon. Good night. And with that, we're finally done with the PS1. I know I just spent the better part of the last 10 minutes angrily ranting, but that's not how I feel towards the console as a whole. The PS1 is a great system and the majority of the games I've played in it are anywhere from decent to awesome. It's just that I can't stand the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, which for whatever reason is the most popular mascot from the console. But like I said, don't take that as me disliking the console, because I really do like it. And with that, we've finally reached the 6th generation of game consoles. Being upfront here, this is my favorite generation of video games. It's when gaming was truly perfected as a form of entertainment. The first console in the generation was the Sega Dreamcast, Sega's last outing as a major console manufacturer. They couldn't have picked a better console to go out with, since I think it's the best game console they ever made. Sure, I only own 5 games for the thing at the moment, but I don't care. It's an amazing system, and I'm proud to own not 1, but 2. Yes, I own 2 Dreamcasts. Anyways, let's get this started with, shall we? Starting off, we've got Sonic Adventure, the Blue Boy's transition to 3D. It's not looked back upon as fondly as Super Mario 64 is, but I think it's pretty good in its own right. Sure, any character besides Sonic severely lacks depth, it has some glitches, the camera is unhelpful, and I would never say it's better than Super Mario 64, but I still get some fun out of it. The Sonic campaign in particular is pretty fun with its great control and speedrunning potential. I'm not a speedrunner, but it's fun to find the fastest route through the levels. The Dreamcast version is my least favorite one, because of one reason, the repetitive, unskippable cutscenes that take up nearly an hour or so of game time. In the first playthrough, it's not so bad, but when you play the other campaigns and are forced to watch the same poorly animated scenes over and over again, it becomes tedious after a while. Still, this game is decent at worst, and I like it fine enough. Next we have...
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my...
Alright, stop that shit. We're not doing that again. This time. So yeah, here we have Sonic Adventure 2. If you know me, you know what I think of this one, so here's a quick summary. This is my favorite Sonic game. Yeah, 3 and Knuckles was great, but this one is flat out phenomenal. What makes it so awesome? Where do I even begin? For one, the control for all the characters is flat out perfect, yes, even in the shooting stages. Sonic and Shadow control just like Sonic in the last game and maybe even a little better. Knuckles and Rouge's glide is much less heavy than Knuckles was in the last game, and Tails and Eggman are much less slippery than E100 to Gamma was. All types of levels are enjoyable for me. Sonic and Shadow are pure, high-octane fun, with over-the-top set-pieces and engaging platforming that's a treat to play. Aside from those levels, the alternate playstyles are done in the best way possible, while they add new mechanics like shooting, or even a new form of progression such as finding 3 pieces of the Master Emerald. They still involve platforming. Sure, the 2 short kart racing levels don't, but they are at least fun, unlike Crash 3's atrocious motorcycle levels. Locking onto enemies and hovering over bottomless pits in the match shooting levels is fun as hell, and I think I'm the only person who loves the exploration and detective work in the treasure hunting levels. Yeah, it isn't a perfect game, because the lightspeed dash can be finicky in the running levels. You don't get bonus points if you get hit after making a combo in the match stages, and I wish there were more states of detection in the treasure hunting radar. FYI, I don't mean I wanted to track all 3 at once, I just wish the radar had more colors to indicate how close to a piece you are. There's also a few version-specific flaws, like the less powerful lock-on in the match stages, it targets slower than later versions, the lack of the exclamation point in the treasure hunting levels which can make finding buried items a mild hassle, but all of these amount to nothing more than nitpicks to me. Overall, I love Sonic Adventure 2, and it's easily one of my favorite platforming games of all time. Oh yeah, and the soundtrack is my favorite in gaming history, and the graphics look fantastic for the era, especially with the 60 frames per second. It fucking rocks, and that's all I can say about it. Next up is Jet Grind Radio, also known as Jet Set Radio in other regions. This is a sort of mix of sports and platforming, and it centers around roller skating, tricks, and graffiti. You'll constantly hear about how poorly this has aged, but from what I played, I don't think it's bad. The biggest problem is turning around, which is fairly slow, but otherwise, I love the cel-shaded art style, the music is catchy, and I adore the early 2000s atmosphere, something I also got from Sonic Adventure 2. The gameplay is fairly enjoyable, but in an arcade kind of way, it's something I can pick up for a little, while I have a short burst of fun with. Next up, Rayman 2: The Great Escape. I could have gotten this game on the N64, since I owned it before getting my first Dreamcast, but I heard this one was the definitive version, so I waited. I think that choice paid off, because I quite like Rayman 2. It controls very well, has good music, some really fun ideas for levels, particularly the level called The Precipice, and the flying shell section towards the end of the game, and while the graphics do look somewhat dated, that's likely, because it was ported up from the N64, and it doesn't even look that bad, to be honest. My only complaints are the relative lack of variety, which the original Spyro the Dragon and Super Mario 64 to a lesser extent had. Now that I think about it, the camera, which can only be controlled with the R trigger and the X and V buttons, and the really tedious pirate ship section that's close to the end of the game. But other than that, this is a solid experience that I would recommend anyone who likes action games to give a shot. And finally, we have Frogger to Swampy's Revenge. Like Rayman 2, I picked this up on Dreamcast, because it's the definitive console version, sporting 60 frames per second and better visuals. As for the game itself, it's obviously a Frogger game, meaning you move around by repeatedly tapping the directional pad. The game is rather short, but it's challenging funny and I enjoyed myself with it. I'll admit, the double jump can be finicky to pull off and the fact you can't rotate in place can get annoying, but other than that, I liked Swampy's Revenge. And that's it for the Sega Dreamcast. It's such a shame that this console didn't take off financially, because it lost such a great console. It's got awesome games, and some innovative ideas that were ahead of its time, like the visual memory unit and even early broadband inline. So yeah, that's it. The Dreamcast is easily my favorite Sega console, and I love it a lot. Remember how I said I don't own an original PlayStation? Yeah, this is how I played the games, the PlayStation 2. This system is easily my favorite Sony console, not only because of its backwards compatibility, but also its own library of excellent games. First up is Ratchet & Clank. This was the first Ratchet game I played, and I thought it was good but pretty flawed. It's got good level design with solid platforming, fun combat mechanics, a decent selection of weapons, my personal favorite music in the series, good-looking graphics for 2002 with impressive environments for the time, and a very well-written, entertaining, funny story. Unfortunately, the controls are somewhat slippery, the strap feature is cumbersome and you don't unlock it until late in the game, the weapons are a little too expensive, and the bosses are fairly tedious. Still, I like Ratchet & Clank quite a bit, but it's probably my least favorite of the first 4 PS2 Ratchet games. Next, Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, the second game in the series. And like Sonic 2, it's a massive improvement over the first one. The control has been cleaned up and is incredibly smooth. You actually have a good strafe feature, the weapons are better and you can upgrade them through use. Same thing for your health. You can get armor now, and there's more ways to earn bolts to buy things, for example, the arena battles. It does have the occasional annoying moment, but those are far outweighed by the fun moments. Overall, Going Commando is a fantastic game and I very much enjoyed it. Oh yeah, and did I mention that it has the best story in the series? No? Well, you heard it right here. Next up is the third Ratchet game, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal. This game gets my vote for the best Ratchet & Clank game for numerous reasons. While I thought Going Commando was the best in terms of story, this game is easily the funniest and most entertaining in the series in this regard. It also carries over all the gameplay improvements from the last game, while adding a few quality of life improvements I didn't even know I wanted, most notably the ability to buy ammo for all your weapons at once. It also has great platforming, the best weapon selection in the series, and good music. Sure, some enemies can be bullet sponges towards the end, but I don't mind that. This game is easily my favorite PS2 title. Next, Ratchet Deadlocked, the fourth in the series. This one takes a different direction to the Ratchet formula, going all in the arena-style gameplay with minimal platforming. To be honest, I don't mind this, since I enjoyed combat in the previous games. Deadlocked doesn't top the last two games, but I still enjoyed it a lot. It has a kick-ass heavy metal-like soundtrack, good-looking visuals, with very impressive weather effects, the same great controls from the last two, and a good selection of weapons with a great degree of customization. My only criticisms are the game's short length, relatively easy difficulty, and the narrow weapon selection. There's actually only 10 weapons in the game. Overall, this game is great and I had a ton of fun playing it. Next, Sly Cooper and the Phoebus Raccoonus. I haven't played much of this one, but what I've experienced so far is pretty good overall. The control isn't my favorite, because it feels a little slippery, but the platforming is fun in spite and the character writing and voice acting is great. Unfortunately, I think my disc is screwed up, because the game crashed at one point. That really sucks, because I really want to play this game. Oh well, if worse comes to worse, I can either play it on PC, X2 or get a new copy. Next, Sly 2 Band of Thieves, and Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves. I'll admit, I haven't played either of these games yet. I think they both look good, but I want to play the series in order, so these will have to wait. I will say I love the comic book aesthetic these games go for. It's for similar reasons why I love Jet Grind Radio's art style. I just think it looks really nice. Next, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. Since last time, I've played some of this game, and it's easily the best Naughty Dog game I've played so far. Unlike the awful PS1 Crash Bandicoot games they developed previously, this game is actually enjoyable and has plenty of good qualities. It controls well, but not perfectly, looks great for 2001, hell, it actually features a day-night cycle, which is impressive for a platforming game like this, and the collectathon gameplay style is as fun as other games in the genre. The only real flaws I can point out are the somewhat finicky attack moves and the requirement to track down 50 green eco orbs to restore a single health point, which I find is an artificial increase in difficulty. This is a nice game, and I can't wait to see what else it has to offer. Coming up next is Sonic Mega Collection Plus. This is, as the name suggests, a compilation of the Sega Genesis Sonic games, but will also include some Game Gear games and other stuff like Comics Zone. I like this collection, and the ports of the Genesis games are solid, even if it does suck that they don't take up the full screen. It also adds a save feature to Sonic 1 and 2, which I appreciate. If you have a PS2 and no other way to play these games, this is a good option. And next, I've got two other compilations, both from the Mega Man series. It's Mega Man Anniversary Collection, containing the first 8 classic Mega Man games, and the Mega Man X Collection, which is composed of the first 6 Mega Man X games. Yep, that's a lot of games. This is how I'm gonna play most Mega Man games. I played the first ever one, which was decent but unbelievably flawed and dated in many areas. I also played Mega Man X2, which was good but not as good as X1 or X4, and Mega Man X3, which I thought was pretty bad with its unfair enemy and boss damage, unbearable backtracking, and a bloated, incoherent mess of stage design. I was only able to stomach 3 levels before I got incredibly bored and dropped it. I'm mostly looking forward to Mega Man 2, 4, 6, and 7, which all look at least decent. However, I'm really not looking forward to X5 or especially X6, both of which have consistent shit thrown their way. Overall, these collections are solid if you have no other way to play the games, but if you can, I'd recommend either emulating them or getting them on original hardware. If you're a collector, own not X2 or X3, because they are expensive as shit on a SNES. Next up, The Simpsons Hit and Run. I played this not knowing what to expect, and I gotta say, this is a pretty fun game. The driving controls work well, the music is catchy, you're hearing a song from it right now, the graphics are decent for the era, and the missions are generally enjoyable. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, since some missions can be tedious and it's very linear for what purports to be a Grand Theft Auto-like game, but overall, it's one of the best licensed games I've ever played, but not the best. We'll get there. But man, I really have to get it on GameCube or Xbox, because the frame rate in the PS2 version is inconsistent to say the least. But like most of these other consoles, I have more games than just what's on the shelf. First up is Shrek Super Slam.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was looking. Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. The world is gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool. Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me, I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed.
This game is an absolute masterpiece, clearly. I mean, it's Shrek, how can it not be? Okay, in all seriousness, this is a decent fighting game, but it's lacking in polish and gets boring after a while. It is another licensed game that isn't complete garbage, so that's gotta count for something, right? Anyway, next is Crash Nitro Kart. I've already laid the smackdown in the Crash Bandicoot franchise, because I think it's utter shit. So does it surprise you that I don't think this game looks that bad? It and Crash Team Racing for the PS1 both look pretty alright, and as long as they control well and are fun, I'll be satisfied. Next, another Crash Racing game, seriously? This one is Crash Tag Team Racing, and honestly, it doesn't look that great. The story is incredibly poorly written and unfunny from what I've seen. In fact, I would be embarrassed if someone walked in on me playing and saw some of those cutscenes, and the gameplay tries to be 4 things at once and doesn't seem to succeed at anything. Don't get me wrong, I could play it and fall in love with it, which has actually happened to me recently with another game we'll get to later, but looking in, this doesn't look like something I've enjoyed. Next we have... Oh good Lord Jesus help me. So, yeah. I own this piece of crap now for some reason. In case you don't know, this game, Frogger the Great Quest, is an absolute coming-of-age masterpiece, with the most gorgeous visuals, the most innovative gameplay, and the most emotional, moving story in all of the history of the medium. Okay, in all seriousness, this game is an incredible specimen in Murphy's Law. Everything that could possibly go wrong did. It controls like shit, plays like shit, looks like shit, the combat is bad, it's so easy that it's boring from start to finish, and the story has uncomfortable and perverse writing. The only redeeming quality in this absolute train wreck is the music, which is actually pretty alright overall, but even that isn't perfect, because some songs sound like muffled ass. Oh yeah, and it's one of those shitty blue disc games, so it barely even fucking works. Also, this was actually the first game I played in my Let's Play channel for whatever reason, and my jaw was on the floor the whole time in sheer disbelief of what I was playing. Actually, why don't I show some highlights from the playthrough?
That's it! A wish upon a falling star! I wish I may, I wish I must find a princess before I bust!
FBI should be knocking at his door any minute now.
Oh yeah! Come to daddy!
Oh my god, no! A princess in the little castle. Why is he talking like he's gonna diddle me in my sleep? Sorry, I'm with you on this one.
Okay, this is pissing me off.
Okay, this is pissing me off. You know, E-rated for the kids. What?
Son of a... You listen to me when I'm talking to you. Did you hear me? Yes, dear. Woman, that butt-ugly bag! I'll tell her where to stick that rolling pin if it's the last thing I do. Darts!
How original!
That was a Mario 64 sound effect.
Wow! How original!
Yeah, it kind of speaks for itself. Anyways, next up is Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, and oh boy this game is a stinker. The controls are nowhere near as good as the first 4 and feel like wading through mud. Ratchet has trouble simply turning around. He always takes a semi-circle turn instead of just fucking turning around like I want him to. The graphics are bad. I get that it was ported up from PSP, but even by those standards it looks like deep-fried ass. The weapons and gadgets are the worst in the series by a wide margin, doing barely any damage and having really fucking stupid ideas. I mean, mimic plants? Really? That's the best fucking idea you could come up with. And the story is a total urethral swap with the characters acting totally out of character and utterly nonsense writing. The only redeeming quality from this absolute dumpster fire is the music, which is quite good. Overall, this game is about as boring as Banjo-Tooie and I really don't like it at all. Next, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And Jesus, finally, another good game. I don't really play Grand Theft Auto for the missions to be honest, and more so enjoy it as something I can boot up and mess around in every now and then. The cheat codes are the real highlight here, with some really fucking funny options that are a ton of fun to play around with. Maybe I'll actually play the game itself sometime, but for now, this is one of those scroll around games for me. Next up, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. This is actually a game I grew up with, which I was only able to play because I had a PS3 that was backwards compatible with PS2 games. It was the first time I was ever exposed to gore in a video game, and I distinctly remember seeing models walking around in the game with their heads cut off and blood spewing from the stub, and thinking how realistic it looked. Keep in mind, I had never seen a game like this before. I also remember this weird vent that would occasionally spawn on a beach that you had to play some RC car minigame to unlock. Yeah man, this game was weird as hell, and my parents definitely didn't like me playing it, that's for sure. I've always wanted to revisit this, but not right now. Next, Snoopy vs. the Red Baron. This game, like Vice City, is a game I remember playing a lot growing up. I absolutely loved it, and I distinctly remember some of the levels, the Peanuts neighborhood, where you flew around in Snoopy's doghouse, the beach area, where you protected lighthouses from drills and battleships, and the forest level with a really difficult combat section. I never finished the game, because it was way too hard for my dumbass child self, but I still liked it a lot. Man, this is a game I absolutely have to revisit someday, and I'm sure I'll have a huge rush of nostalgia when I do. Even if it ends up being way worse than I remember, I'll still be happy to play it again. And finally, we have Crash to Insanity. Given all the thrashing I've been giving to Crash Bandicoot in this video, it may come as a shock that I actually liked this game. I know, even I was shocked at how much I enjoyed it. It has good controls, solid level design, a decent a cappella soundtrack, and good graphics for the time. It doesn't come as a surprise to me that Traveler's Tales made this game, because anytime Naughty Dog touched this franchise, they produced absolute cow shit. This isn't an absolutely amazing game, and I still prefer so many other games over it, but it's actually not bad, which is more than I can say for any of the previous Crash Bandicoot games, including Traveler's Tales' previous entry in the franchise, Wrath of Cortex, which was better than the PS1 games but still boring and bad. But that's still not my entire PS2 collection. In this other shelf, I keep a bunch of games stashed down at the bottom. As you can see, it's mostly the assorted junk section of my collection, containing mostly shovelware or stuff I don't care about. The only noteworthy games down here are Stuntman and Hulk Ultimate Destruction, both of which I remember quite fondly from growing up, but other than that, not much to see here. And that finally does it for the PS2. Overall, I love this console a lot, but it's not my favorite. Still, it has great games, and the PS1 backwards compatibility is a major plus. Any aspiring game collector should definitely have one of these in their collection. We've finally reached it, a Nintendo GameCube. And let me be frank, this is not only my favorite Nintendo system, not only my favorite 6th generation console, but it's my favorite game console, period. I love this thing so fucking much. So let's get started, shall we? As is normal for these Nintendo consoles, we're starting off with the best of the best. Super Mario Sunshine, the second 3D Mario game ever released. I may get dated by saying this, but this game is not only my favorite Mario game, but my favorite platforming game as well. As great as all the previous Mario games are, they don't quite top Sunshine for me. What makes me love it so much? Like Sonic Adventure 2, it comes down to a little something called fucking everything. The most notable thing I love is the controls. Super Mario 64 also handled well, but it doesn't quite compare to the level of precision and pure satisfaction these controls provide. Everything from the more forgiving wall jumps to the more precise general movement to the swoosh noises the moves make, it's an absolute treat to play and makes the platforming a lot of fun. The level design itself is also my favorite in the series, being open collectathon levels with tons of challenging but 100% fair platforming and missions to do. I especially love the secret stages, which are tough as nails obstacle courses that really test your skills. But the biggest addition to the Mario formula is the flash liquidizing ultra dosing device, or FLUDD for short. To put it bluntly, FLUDD is an absolute game changer for the Mario series. It offers very in-depth movement tech from the hover nozzle alone, and I'm sure there's tons of things I have yet to discover with this mechanic. I really hate that they abandoned FLUDD after this one game, because there's still so much you could do with him. Also, yeah, I like the blue coins. Sue me. They add an incentive to explore the stages and I enjoy going after all of them. The graphics are also the most gorgeous of the 6th generation. The tropical island setting is a great change of pace for the series, and the music is supremely underrated. I don't really know what else to say, this game fucking rocks, and it's without a doubt one of my favorites of all time. And like Sonic Adventure 2, I didn't even grow up with it. That's the power of this game. Next up is Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut. This version is definitely the better one for me, because you can skip the cutscenes. The controls feel better with the GameCube controller, which is my favorite game controller, in case you didn't know, and it actually runs at 60 frames per second, unlike the Dreamcast original. Sure, it has worse visuals and the alternate playstyles besides Sonic still lack depth, but I still like it much more. Oh, and anyone who tries to claim this is glitchier than the original is talking out of their ass. I've played both, and one version isn't significantly glitchier than the original. Overall, DX is a good game, but I wish more work was done to improve the fundamental game design itself. And next up is Sonic Adventure 2, Battle. Obviously, it's a port of Sonic Adventure 2 to the GameCube. That's pretty much as complicated as it gets. Like DX, I prefer this version to the original, but not to as high of a degree as with DX. I can play either version and have a good time. This version has a few gameplay improvements, like increasing the strength of the match lock-on, adding an exclamation point when you're on top of an item in the treasure hunting stages, and a much better multiplayer experience. Now, I haven't played it, but even just looking at the details, I know it's better, more characters unlocked at the start, more maps, and more customization. I also find the controls to be the slightest bit better because of the GameCube's slightly better analog stick, though it played just fine on Dreamcast, like I said. If you want to play this game in an old console, then this is the one to go with. Next we have Sonic Heroes. If you remember to last time, I was pretty negative towards this one. I made it out to be a bad game or something. But now, I'm gonna do the unthinkable, I'm admitting that I was wrong. I played this game again, playing only Team Sonic and completely ignoring the Chaos Emeralds. And this time, I actually enjoyed the game quite a bit. Don't get me wrong, I still have a few issues with it. The controls can be slippery while playing. As the speed characters, it's a fairly unpolished Team Dark and the special stages still suck and shouldn't have been required to reach the last story segment. And the bosses range from tedious to annoying, but I made more out of those flaws than they are really worth. I think this is one of the most creative Sonic games to date, featuring a fun 3-person gameplay style, decent level design, functional controls, and hell, even the combat system got better, now that I know the importance of upgrading the strength of your character's attacks and using the other formations than speed. Overall, I was really unfair to this game and I don't get why I was so harsh to it before. Trust me, it's way better than the utterly repugnant rubbish known as Crash Bandicoot Warped, that I can tell you. Next up, we have Mario Kart Double Dash. I haven't played this game yet for whatever reason, but what I've seen looks rather enjoyable. Funnily enough, the double team aspect reminds of Crash Tag Team Racing, except it actually looks good. Trust me, I'll get to this one. Just not right now. Next, Pac-Man World 2. I mentioned this one earlier when talking about the first Pac-Man World, and yeah, this game is a huge improvement. It's yet another game I played growing up, and playing it now, I rather liked it. The controls are very smooth, especially the let's grab move. Holy shit, it's actually perfect. The music is good, the graphics are nice, and the level design is challenging, while staying completely fair. It also takes some concepts out of the early 3D Sonic games, such as the bounce bracelet like butt bounce, spin dash like red roll, and the pack-top trolls that bear an uncanny resemblance to the Lightspeed dash ring trails. My only complaints concern the bosses, which are mixed in quality, and that some later levels really start to push it in length, often lasting 10 minutes each. Still, this is a solid game, and while it's not the best I've ever played, I still get a lot of fun out of it. Additionally, there's Pac-Man vs. included with it, but I haven't played it yet so I can't comment on it. Overall, Pac-Man World 2 is my favorite Pac-Man game, not that it has that much competition for that title, but still, and I would absolutely recommend it. Next up is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Remember how I've been teasing what my favorite licensed game is? Well, here it is. idfk is easily my favorite licensed game ever made. It's so good that it's actually comparable to some other all-time great collectathons like Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, the Spyro games, and Banjo-Kazooie. Yeah, it's that fucking good. For one, the controls and physics are absolutely spot on. The movement is smooth as hell, and the jumps have the perfect reach and momentum to them. Like Super Mario Sunshine and Sonic Adventure 2, this is one of those games where the simple act of moving around is fun in its own right. The platforming is tons of fun, the level design is expansive without becoming confusing like in Banjo-Tooie, and the difficulty curve is incredibly smooth across the 9 main stages. Not only that, but the music is great, and the visuals, while somewhat dated, look nice for the time. My only complaint is the occasional between-level backtracking and the final boss is somewhat annoying, but other than that, I really have almost nothing bad to say about this one. Like Pac-Man World 2, I played this one and liked it as a kid, but I didn't get to truly experience what it had to offer until now. Overall, this game is great and I enjoyed playing it a lot. Next up, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. This is an interesting one. It uses the same art style and game engine from idfk, but is its own game, so it's what you'd call a mission pack sequel. I've enjoyed it so far, but not nearly as much as idfk. For one, it's noticeably more linear than before, and some of the missions and levels can get obnoxious, most notably the paddy wagon, though it's still nowhere near as revolting and terrible as the driving stages from Crash Warped. In spite, it's still designed well and controls just as well as idfk, it's just not quite as good. Next after that is Luigi's Mansion. I haven't played much of this one, because it didn't really grab me. I found the gameplay rather slow, the graphics unappealing, and the music wasn't my cup of tea, though it's not bad. Overall, I wouldn't call the very little I played of it offensive or horrible, just not my thing. In addition to these games, I also own the Game Boy Player, which is compatible with all games from the Game Boy family of consoles. It's not that necessary and is far from the best option to play these games, but it's still a cool novelty nonetheless. Oh yeah, and the disc is real. And that's it for the GameCube. It took less time than the PS2, but that doesn't mean it's not as good or something like that. Overall, this console is amazing and I love it. It's easily my favorite game console of all time, and it has amazing games, a great controller, and I actually like its physical appearance, too. If a PS2 was a must-own for collectors, then a GameCube, or at least GameCube games and a console we'll discuss later, is a 100% necessity. I seriously can't rave about this system enough. I know this is gonna be a short one, but I still want to go over it for the sake of being thorough. These are all of my original Xbox games. Yeah, only 6. And I haven't played any of them. I'm still gonna show them off real quick, so let's get started. First, Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne, made by the same developer as Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar Games. This is apparently a third-person shooter, a genre that, from my experiences, I enjoy. Obviously there was Ratchet and Clank, but also Agent 9 from Spyro 3. If this game is anywhere near as enjoyable as those, then that's great. I've also heard the story is good too, so maybe I'll play this sometime. And next is Hulk Ultimate Destruction. I also own this for PS2, but the Xbox version was the first one I got years ago to play on the 360. I remember enjoying it, but that was a while ago now. I really should revisit it sometime soon, but like I've been saying so many times in this video, there's way more other games I want to get to first, so this one is gonna have to sit and wait in my backlog for now. Next, Godfather the game. I haven't even watched any of the Godfather movie trilogy, so I wouldn't know the first thing about the game. I know absolutely nothing about it. Oh, my first guess is that it's a third-person shooter of some kind, and I don't want to play it before watching the movies, which I'm not in a rush to do, so I'm probably not gonna play this for a long time, assuming I even do to begin with. Next is Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2005. No one cares. Next up is Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow. From what I've seen, Splinter Cell is a stealth game series, and this just so happens to be the one game from the series I own. I want to play the series at some point, alongside other stealth game series like Metal Gear Solid, but not right now. Man, I'm noticing a running theme with these games, stuff I want to play at some time, but won't for a while. But trust me, I'll get to it someday. And finally we have Star Wars The Clone Wars, which is admittedly a game I have zero interest in, and along with it, Tetris Worlds, something I might play one day, if I get terribly drunk and that's it for the original Xbox. Yeah, I really need to get more games for this console. I'm thinking of getting stuff like Blinks the Time Sweeper, Halo Combat Evolved, or even Xbox versions of games I already own, because they are apparently the definitive versions, as well as an original Xbox console itself, because the 360's backwards compatibility isn't that great. By the process of elimination, this is my least favorite 6th generation console, but trust me, it's only because I've barely played any games on it. Next up is the jump to the 7th generation with the Nintendo Wii. As for my impressions of this generation of gaming as a whole, I think it's good, but still a step down from the 4th, 5th, and especially 6th generations. For a smooth transition, I'll look at Nintendo's entry first, the Wii, because it was more on par with 6th generation hardware. In fact, it's basically just a slightly beefed up GameCube. This console is good and has some really high quality titles on it, but I much prefer Nintendo's previous offerings in terms on controllers and even games. Anyways, let's begin. First up is Super Mario Galaxy. This one is a huge departure from the previous 3D Mario games. Instead of a collectathon with a few open-ended levels, Mario Galaxy is a more linear affair where the power stars act like the goalpost from the 2D games. It's still not fully committed to linear level design like some later 3D entries and has some open-ended stages, but it's still far more linear than, say, Bob-on Battlefield or Rico Harbor. Overall, this is a good game, but I have a lot of issues with it. For one, Mario feels a bit slower than previous games, and the control isn't nearly as tight and satisfying. Don't get me wrong, the base platforming controls are just fine, but not as good as previous games. It also has a ton of raw sewage they like to call alternate playstyles. All of these are tacked on motion control gimmicks, like the manta ray surfing, the ball rolling, the ghost races, and the floating bubble, to name a few, and they're all trash. They control like ass because of the motion controls, and none of them are fun. So, basically, anything that isn't the base Mario platforming, which, by the way, is thankfully the majority of the game, sucks a fat dick. In spite of all this, though, the graphics are gorgeous, the music is fantastic, and the level design is solid, although not as interesting as some other games I've talked about already. I know I may seem really negative towards this one, but believe me, I like Super Mario Galaxy. I just like 64 and Sunshine a hell of a lot more, and I don't think Galaxy has aged all that well. Next up is Super Mario Galaxy 2. I think the perfect way to describe this game is as follows: the same thing, except better. Much better. This is definitely my favorite Wii game, and it does practically everything better than the first Galaxy. The controls are the exact same, so thankfully it controls well, the graphics look just as pretty, and the music is a bit more catchy in general, but the biggest improvement has to be the level design and alternate gameplay modes themselves. For one, the levels are a lot tighter in design than before. Galaxy 1 was just fine in terms of levels, but Galaxy 2's seem to be much less bland. Also, the garbage motion control gimmicks have seen an improvement here. The manta ray thing was cut, rightfully so, because it sucked so much ass before, and the ball rolling's level design was upgraded to be much more conducive to the cruddy motion controls you're given. It's still not fun, but it's actually tolerable this time. Overall, Super Mario Galaxy 2 is a great game, and while it's far from my favorite Mario entry, it's still a ton of fun, and I would recommend you play it, if you haven't already. The fact that Nintendo forgot about it in a certain collection but remembered the first Galaxy instead is a true crime, in my opinion. Next is New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It's the second game in the New Super Mario Bros. Sub-series, and was actually my first ever Mario game. Even with the nostalgic attachment I have to it, I still think it's rather mediocre to be Mario's standards. For what it's worth, it controls well, has competent level designs, and functions mechanically. Still, the level design itself is so bland that I find this one rather boring to revisit. Unlike all the previous 2D entries, it seems somewhat soulless and relatively lifeless. The music and visuals only solidify this, because despite being on a more powerful system than all the previous games, they still seem more thrown together and bland. That's my main issue with this game, it's bland. It's not a functionally bad game, but it's easily one of my least favorite 2D Mario games because of how goddamn forgettable it is. Next up is Mario Kart Wii. This was one of the first Mario Kart games I ever played, and I forget if I liked it or not as a kid. I remember enjoying myself, so I probably did, but I also vaguely remember getting angry at it too. Then again, I was a sore loser as a kid, so maybe that's why. Anyways, I haven't played this game myself since I was a kid. I don't really see a reason to go back to it, unless I get a few friends over or something, so for now, I have no opinion on this one. And next we have Sonic Colors, a game that was considered the end of Sonic's dark age by many when it released, but now is looked back upon as mediocre. As for me, it was the first boost formula Sonic game I played, and I rather liked it, but it's far from my favorite 3D Sonic game. The gameplay is fun, the music is great, the graphics are nice, and it's technically polished. I just prefer how the adventure games handled and for their more in-depth stages. Sonic Colors is a quality title, I just prefer other games in the series, that's all. But that isn't my entire Wii collection, because I still own several more games for the system. First, Mario's Sports Mix. It's a sports game collection with Mario. I remember playing it a lot years ago. I still don't give a shit about sports games. Moving on. Next, Wreck-It Ralph. This game was a Christmas gift for me years ago. You see, I asked for the movie, but I got this game for the Wii instead. I was so disappointed that I didn't even open the game up and play it. Here, it's still in its plastic wrap. Who knows, maybe I could sell this or something, because I've heard the game itself apparently sucks, so that's the best use for it. Next is... What the actual fuck is this shit? Get that trash out of here. Here we go, Wii Sports. Pretty great case I have for it, am I right? Anyways, I actually quite fondly remember this one, especially the boxing, baseball, and tennis. It's not something I'll probably revisit these days, but maybe I could for a video or something, who knows. Next is Marvel Super Hero Squad. This is a game me and my brother played a bit growing up, but I don't remember much about it. The only thing I do remember is that it was some kind of beat 'em up. I don't think I'll play this on my own anytime soon, but it could be fun for a let's play or something. Next up, get the fuck out of here, you piece of shit. Next up is Ghostbusters the video game. I remember going into this expecting something exactly like the Xbox 360 and PS3 Ghostbusters game, but it was a weird cartoonish game that was boring as hell. Maybe I'll come back to this one day and end up liking it, but for now, I'm not too sure about it. Next, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga. As with the other LEGO games in my collection, I played this a ton when I was younger, and I loved the crap out of it. I did enjoy LEGO Batman and Indiana Jones more, but this was still a good one. Man, there's so many fucking games I have to revisit. Speaking of games I have to revisit, Poke Park Wii Pikachu's Adventure and Pokemon Battle Revolution. I remember Poke Park much more, but I played at least some of both as a kid. Poke Park isn't very well regarded these days, but I have a decent degree of nostalgia towards it. I don't really care about the Pokemon series these days, these games included, but I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of playing these two again. And that does it for the Nintendo Wii. Overall, this is a good system, but its games don't quite compare to, say, the GameCube, for me at least. Still, I like it quite a bit, and it will always hold a special place in my heart for being the first Nintendo home console I owned. It also has tons of other features, like Virtual Console and even GameCube backwards compatibility. In fact, Virtual Console is how I first played the classic 2D Mario games, the N64 version of Super Mario 64, and several other N64 games like Smash Brothers and Paper Mario. So yeah, the Wii is good, I just like other consoles better. Next up, we have the Xbox 360. Like the Wii, I grew up with this console as well. In fact, I grew up with all three of the major 7th generation consoles. This one is probably my second favorite of the generation, and it has some really good games and a fantastic controller. Anyways, let's begin with Sonic Unleashed. This was son of a fucking bitch. Anyways, as I was saying, this was chronologically the first Boost Formula Sonic game released, but I played Colors and Generations before it. Overall, this one is probably my least favorite of the three so far, but don't get me wrong, I do like what I've played. The graphics are nice for 2008, the music is stellar, speaking of which, a track from the soundtrack of this game is playing right now. The daytime Sonic stages are mindless fun, and even the Warthog isn't the worst thing ever. My only issues are that the controls for daytime Sonic are fairly slippery, the homing attack is mapped to the action button instead of the jump button like it should be for some reason, the bosses are kind of tedious, and the Warthog levels have a tendency to drag, but other than that, I'm liking Sonic Unleashed so far. Next, Sonic Generations. And for the Boost Sonic games, this is easily my favorite. In fact, I think it's better than Sonic Adventure EX. The controller is the best in the Boost games, the level design is some of the best in the series, both for the modern and classic Sonic halves. The soundtrack remixes from the older games sound great, especially from the Genesis games, which is the best these songs have ever sounded. The graphics are my favorite in the franchise, and it's fun from start to finish. The only things I don't like are the requirement to beat the extra challenges located above the level entrances to progress and the boss fights, but other than that, this game is fantastic and is one of the essential entries in the Sonic series. Unfortunately my 360 disc doesn't work, so I had to play it through Steam, but the two versions are so identical that it doesn't matter. Next up, the LEGO Batman Trilogy. I played these games a bunch growing up, and like LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga on Wii, they were really fun. I think my favorite of the three was either the first or second one back then, but I don't remember exactly. I definitely want to revisit these for a let's play or something, like so many other games in this video. And finally, we have the games I keep stored in the small shelf. There's a ton of them, including the Orange Box, LEGO Indiana Jones, Halo 4, Angry Birds Trilogy, Plants vs. Zombies, and various sports games, licensed games, and everything else in between. I also have almost every Call of Duty game released for the system. I remember playing so many of these games growing up, and I can't begin to count how many hours I sank into, say, Black Ops Zombies or LEGO Indiana Jones, for instance. Not every one of these games is good, but most are from what I remember. And that's it for the Xbox 360. Yeah, I didn't have that much to say about it, but like I said, that doesn't mean I dislike the system. Overall, the Xbox 360 is a good console with many great games and I'm glad I grew up with it alongside the Wii. And now for the final console in the 7th generation, the PlayStation 3. I'll be upfront with this one, this is easily my least favorite console of the generation and my least favorite PlayStation console, when it comes to exclusive games. Now, I don't own or haven't played any of the big hits for the system like The Last of Us, the Uncharted games, or the Ratchet & Clank Future series, but the games I have played in it aren't half bad. So yeah, it isn't a bad system, but I'm not a huge fan of it. To start, we have Grand Theft Auto 4. I haven't played this one as extensively as others in the series, but I have played enough to consider this my least favorite GTA game by a country mile. For one, the graphics are incredibly drab, have a very narrow color palette of gray, and more gray, and they are not appealing at all. Sure, they may have been impressive for the time, but today, the game looks like shit in my opinion. Yeah, GTA San Andreas and Vice City look rather dated by today's standards, but at least those games had some color to them. The gameplay of 4 is also the most boring of all the Grand Theft Auto games, and messing around in it isn't nearly as fun as the other entries because of the severe lack of things to do in it. It's without a doubt one of the most boring games I've played in my life. Not as much as Banjo-Tooie or Ratchet and Clank Size Matters, but still not fun at all. Next up is Ghostbusters the video game. This is the game I played the most on the PS3, and it's easily the one I remember the best. I really need to revisit it sometime, because I recall absolutely loving it years ago. Next, MotorStorm, which I have absolutely no memory or interest in at all. And finally, Rock Band, which I can't play now, because I sold off the drum kit and other instruments last year or something. And that's it for the PS3. Yeah, 4 games. That's all I have. I mostly used this console to play PS2 games back in the day, like Snoopy, and to watch movies and YouTube videos. Like I said, it's not like this is a bad system or something, it's just not one that I find myself playing on at all. Next in line is the Nintendo Switch, which is the newest console I own. I had always wanted to get myself one of these since late 2017, but since I got carried away with collecting for older systems, I missed the boat in the Switch completely. A few months ago, I finally decided to take the plunge and get one, and I have to say, I wish I had one of these things sooner. The hybrid nature of the console is a good feature, and it has some really great games on it. I don't have many of games for it, but the ones I've played have been good to great. So, let's get started with this, shall we? Obviously, I'm starting with the signature Mario title in the platform, Super Mario Odyssey. And hot damn, this game is fucking good. Easily the best 3D Mario game since Super Mario Sunshine. Its controls are the best since that game. The camera controls are finally analog again, just like Sunshine. The level design is some of the most solid in the series, and they manage to be big without being confusing like Banjo-Tooie. And the capture mechanic with Cappy is a great idea. That's one of the most fun things the series has ever done, though I still prefer Flood for the greater movement options. It isn't perfect, because I'm not a fan of how the dive was mapped. You have to ground point in midair and press the action button instead of just pressing the action button. There's way too many moons in the game for 100% completion to be worth it. I mean, 1000 moons, good lord. And there's still so much untapped potential to the capture mechanic. But as is, this is a fantastic game that is one of my new favorites in the Mario series. Next up is Super Mario Maker 2. I never played the original Mario Maker for one reason, it was on the Wii U, otherwise known as Nintendo's worst performing home console by far. Anyways, from the 5 or so hours I've played, this game is a fun time. If I ever start streaming, which I have plans to try eventually, this is the perfect material for it. While making your own levels is kind of cumbersome and not my favorite thing in the world to do, playing other people's levels is a fun time. Only one problem, you have to pay for Nintendo's poor online services to use it. Playing levels on this game isn't bad, but co-op uses an inexcusable peer-to-peer connection, which is laughable for 2019 when this game came out. Good God, Nintendo, how about make your online free, if you're not gonna improve it? Donkey was right, Nintendo makes great games, but doesn't know how to run a company. But that's a topic for another day. Right now, all you need to know is that Super Mario Maker 2 is solid, but I probably won't be playing it much past October of next year, because I'm not renewing my online subscription. Why? Like I said, that's a topic for another video. And next we have, size, something embarrassing. I actually fucking bought this collection right here, Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Why, you may ask? I don't know, I guess for the portable Sunshine, but even still, this is a laughable, lazy embarrassment of a collection. I mean, 64 isn't even in widescreen and has audio issues. Sunshine didn't support the GameCube controller until the first update, and there were fucking debug cubes you would see on Dolphin, not to mention it was based on the PAL version, and all the games had inverted camera controls at launch. Oh, and the extras you get included. Just a music player. Yep, that's it. And don't even get me started in the limited digital release. Limited physical is excusable, but limiting the digital release? That's outright anti-consumer. Overall, this collection is lazy as fuck, and the only thing that saves it is the portability. I have no idea why I wasted my money on this, and that's $60 hard-earned dollars I'll never get back. Admittedly, I wasn't aware of all the issues with it when I bought it, but after finding out about just how slapped together this release was, I haven't played it out of embarrassment. I'm thinking of selling this off, because then at least I won't have to explain myself if someone ever comes over and sees this on my shelf. Or I might just hide it. Either way, don't buy this thing. Just emulate the games instead. Next up, we have a game that may shock you given my taste in games, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Trust me, going into this one, I wasn't sure if I would like it, and when I actually played it, I couldn't have been more pleasantly surprised if I found $1,000 lying on the ground. I ended up falling in love with this game. For one, the visuals are absolutely gorgeous, and the lighting in particular is incredibly stunning. The music is also laid back and fits the atmosphere of the game perfectly. The game itself is perfect to just kick back with after a long day. It's so peaceful, serene, and relaxing that playing it is sure to calm even the most jaded, cynical motherfucker out there. I also find building an island of my own design to be a fun time, the same way I find building parks in Planet Coaster to be enjoyable. Also, can I say how fucking adorable this game is? I mean, look at this picture. Just fucking look at it. Look at how fucking cute it is. That. Anyways, this game is a real surprise. It's easily one of my favorite Switch games. I don't know if it's my absolute favorite, but it might just be, because it's the one I keep playing on the console. In fact, I struggled to get this video done, because I just wanted to keep playing this game. I'm serious, I like it that much. Next up is Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. Just like Super Mario Maker, I never played this game before, because it was on the Wii U. I could have gotten the 3DS version, but I didn't want to, for whatever reason. So, I waited to get it until now, and I have to say, this is a fairly decent game. Its controls are good, and solving the puzzles is fun enough, but it's a little too easy for my tastes. This was most likely aimed right at kids, because it's really not a challenge at all. Now, I haven't played episode 2 yet, which could very well get a lot harder, but episode 1 was fairly easy. I'd rather play a fun game that's too easy than one that's frustrating and not fun because of it, but I do wish this game was a little more in-depth. And finally, we have SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. This was a long-awaited remake of Battle for Bikini Bottom, obviously. The graphics have been updated to look even better, and they're pretty appealing. Now, I haven't played this version yet, but I have seen it in action. It may seem unnecessary that I got this game, since I already own the original, but I picked it up for the portability factor, if nothing else. I'm probably not gonna play this version, unless I have it with me, while I'm out somewhere and want to play me, but I'm sure it will be at least a decent remaster. And that's it for the Nintendo Switch. Overall, I like it, but it's not my favorite Nintendo console. Still, playing console games on the go is a great feature, and the games I've played in it are generally fantastic. I definitely want to get more games for it, including Super Mario 3D World next February. Oh yeah, and said please port the Sonic Adventure games and Heroes to it. I need a portable Sonic Adventure 2 in my life. And now, we've reached the dedicated handheld consoles. Fittingly, we're starting with the original Nintendo Game Boy, which was the first handheld to truly hit it big. This thing lasted an impressive amount of time, from 1989 to 2003. Through its lifespan, many great games were released for it, but I only own a few games for it, so this won't take too long. Let's start with Super Mario Land, one of the launch titles for the system. It was the first Mario game in the handheld, obviously, and it sold insanely well. In fact, it sold more copies than Super Mario Bros. 3. Yeah, wrap your head around that one. As for the game itself, it's a decent little handheld Mario adventure, but it's one of my lesser favorite 2D Mario games. For one, the control is somewhat janky, there's limited continues, and the game only has 12 levels and you can beat it in under 30 minutes. However, it still feels like a Mario game. The platforming is still fun once you get used to the controls, and it didn't take me long to, and the music is fantastic for 8-bit. Overall, while not much better than decent, Super Mario Land is a fun game, and I would recommend it to other fans of the series or other platforming fans in general. Next up is Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. If there was ever a use for the phrase underrated gem, this game is a hidden gem from the Mario series. It's right up there in quality with Mario 3 and Mario World. I'm serious. The controls are incredibly smooth, the level design is funny and contains great platforming sections, the music is some of the best in the series, and the graphics are by far the best in the system. Sure, it's also fairly short, not that hard, and some bosses can be annoying, but I don't care. This game is so charming, fun, and I absolutely love it. If you haven't already, I implore you to play this game by any means necessary this instant. You won't regret it. This is by far the best Game Boy game, the best handheld Mario game, and one of my favorite Mario games in general. And to be honest, besides those games, I don't own anything else that noteworthy. I have Tetris 2, which I don't think looks as good as the original Tetris, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fall of the Foot Clan, which looks like licensed trash, and Killer Instinct, which I'm sure is also crap, because it's a handheld port of a 1990s console game. Those were usually pretty terrible. Yep, that's basically it. I like the Super Mario Land games quite a bit, but other than that, I haven't played much on the original Game Boy. I do want to get more games for it, but I'd rather focus on the 6th generation consoles, the N64, the PS1, and the Switch. Are you fucking kidding me? This shit again? Fuck this shit, next console. And now, it's time for the Game Boy Advance, the true successor to the Game Boy. I'll be honest, this is my favorite dedicated handheld console. I say dedicated handheld, because I like the Switch more than it. I own the SP model, and it's by far the best Game Boy console. It's backwards compatible with original Game Boy games, it has a backlit screen, the works. So then, let's get started with it. To begin, let's look at the Super Mario Advance games, all remakes of classic 2D Mario games. Super Mario Advance is easily the definitive version of Super Mario Bros. 2, but it's still incredibly flawed. The controls are slippery, the camera is flat out bad on occasion, and a chunk of the levels, World 5 and 6 to be precise, are very poorly designed, especially the second level of World 5. The fact I like this game in spite is amazing, because those low points are pretty damn stinky. Next is Super Mario Advance 2, Super Mario World. I don't like this version of the game as much as the SNES original, but it's still a solid version. The save feature is upgraded to allow you to save anytime and it adds some checkpoints to levels that didn't have them. However, the music and graphics aren't as good. It's one of those cases where the games are so identical that the aspects outside of gameplay decide my favorite version, so you can't go along with either version. Next, Super Mario Advance 3, Yoshi's Island. Why this wasn't the original Super Mario Bros. Instead is beyond me, but from what I've played of it, it's practically identical to the original. Of course, the SNES version is superior for its better colors and music, but they are almost the same. You could get the same experience from either one. And finally, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3. This is my second favorite version of the game, and it has some strengths going for it. It adds a save feature that functions exactly like the one from the SNES version of Super Mario World, and game overs no longer kick you back to the start of the world. These things never bothered me in the original, so these additions, while positive, aren't groundbreaking. Honestly, I prefer the NES version, because I think its rendition of the soundtrack is the best, but that's only because all three versions, NES, SNES, and GBA, are practically the same apart from sound and graphics. If you're gonna play these games, you can't go wrong with any version. Next up, we have the Sonic Advance games. The first Sonic Advance is easily my favorite from what I've played. It's basically just a classic Sonic game. In the GBA, it controls the same, the moveset is the same, and the level design is the same level of quality. It does suffer from occasional visibility problems from the Game Boy Advance's small screen size, but it's more than playable. In terms of gameplay, this is the true Sonic the Hedgehog 4. Not Mania, and definitely not whatever the hell this was. Oh yeah, by the way, hot take, I don't really like Mania all that much. But I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. Next is Sonic Advance 2. I barely played this one, as in I've only played the first level, but what I experienced was fine, but somewhat bland. It really is the embodiment of the phrase "hold right to win," because that's what you do. There's barely any enemies, platforming, and anything else that makes a 2D Sonic game fun. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this will be awful or anything, but the first impressions it made were somewhat lacking. Next, Sonic Advance 3. I played even less of this than Sonic Advance 2, which translates to I didn't even leave the HUD world. Wait, what did I just say? HUD worlds in a 2D game? Why? I've heard this one has a fun partner mechanic, but what I've seen of the level design doesn't look very good, with constant blind sides and pitfalls that ambush you from off screen. Maybe I'll eat my own words here, but I'm cautiously optimistic for this one. Next, the remakes of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. Overall, these are pretty solid, but I prefer the SNES versions of the first two, because those versions seem much more polished, have better graphics, and better music. The GBA version of the third game, however, is my favorite of the two. I actually like this version, because the music is much livelier and something about it makes it much less boring than the other version, or I don't know what. It also adds a whole new world to the game. Overall, these are solid remakes, but as usual for these GBA ports, the originals are generally better. But those three trilogies are not the only Game Boy Advance games I own. I also have Namco Museum, which is a decent collection of classic Namco arcade games, and well, whatever this piece of shit is, I also own all of the GBA Pokemon games, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, and Leaf Green. I don't really care about these games nowadays, because I'm long past my Pokemon phase, but when I was growing up, I liked all of these. Even if they are all fake cartridges that would delete my save data. And that's it for the Game Boy Advance. I like this system a lot, and both its own great library and backwards compatibility make it a must-own for collectors. And now it's time for the Nintendo DS. This was the first video game console I remember buying from a store. It was sometime back in 2007 or 2008. I went to a Toys R Us to get the red DS Lite model you saw just a second ago. These days, I don't use my original DS at all, but I still have a respect for the system and its games, as well as a ton of nostalgia. So, let's do this. First, we have Super Mario 64 DS. This was actually the first version of the game I played, even before I got the N64 version on Wii Virtual Console. Having revisited this about 2 years ago, I must say, it's vastly inferior to the N64 version. It does add a ton of new content, including new stages, new playable characters, new stars, and new music tracks. However, these additions are nearly undermined by one fundamental flaw: the controls suck ass. Really, I don't like how this game controls at all. Whoever thought this game was a good fit for the DS should have gotten a pay cut, because this game was not designed around cruddy 8-directional D-pad controls, where precise turning is essentially out of the question. Don't get me wrong, this version isn't unplayable, it just feels bad to play and isn't nearly as fun or replayable as the N64 original. At least Luigi's backflip move makes it more manageable, but still, the on-foot controls just aren't very good. Oh, and the graphics are a downgrade, with ugly colors and a jagged, slapped-together look. Honestly, this remake seems like it was only made to show that the DS was capable of running the game. Next up, we have New Super Mario Bros. This was the first New Super Mario Bros. Game, and guess what, it's just a New Super Mario game. That's it. Alright, in all seriousness, this is easily the best New Super Mario Bros. Game there is. The aesthetic is distinct from the others, but still very similar. It's got the best level design of the new Super games, and it's the most challenging and engaging overall. Sure, some levels get annoying and I would much rather play almost any other Mario game over this one, but this is a solid game that I'd say is worth at least one playthrough. Oh yeah, and the credits theme is still golden. Next is Sonic Classic Collection. This is a decent option for classic Sonic in the Go, but these versions suffer from occasional frame drops and worse visuals than the originals, obviously, since it's a handheld console emulating a home console. If you had to go with any version of these games, oh, I'd say emulate the Genesis versions or play them in another collection of some kind, because there's an obvious compromise with the classic collection versions. But that's not all my DS games. I have a bunch more, all of which I've organized into 5 groups. Let's start with the Mario spin-offs. This group is made up of Mario Kart DS and Mario & Luigi, Partners in Time. Mario Kart DS was one of my first Mario Kart games, along with Wii, and I remember liking it back in the day. It doesn't look that great by today's standards, but the gameplay was funny and I forgot just how great the music was, especially Luigi Pinball, which you're hearing right now. Partners in Time is a game I have even less experience with, because I can't remember a thing about it. All I know is that it's an RPG, a genre I don't really like, and that the plot involves Mario and Luigi teaming up with their younger selves. Maybe I'll play it, but I don't want to right now. And the next group is the Pokemon games. I did play the GBA games a bit when I grew up, but these games right here on the DS were the ones I really grew up with. I loved pretty much all of them as a kid, but as the years went on, I gradually lost interest in them. This culminated with White 2, which was one of my biggest gaming disappointments at that time. I was bored about an hour or two in and dropped the game because of it. Overall, these games were good growing up and I'll always have a soft spot for them, but I couldn't give two shits about them these days. The next group after that is what I like to call the disappointments. Plants vs. Zombies was probably the biggest disappointment of the bunch, since I loved the console version so much. This DS version was boring, shallow, and looked like a shitty mobile game. I barely played it, and stuck to the console version. Next, Hotel for Dogs. I remember liking the movie, but the game was a crappy side-scroller or something. It wasn't fun at all. Next, Avatar the Airbender. For whatever reason, dumbass child me thought that the atrocious Avatar reboot was a good movie. God, I was dumb back then, so I got this game. And it was a piece of shit. The touchscreen main entry screen was so unresponsive that I barely made it into the game, and when I did, the graphics were revolting and the gameplay was confusing and boring, so I gave up on it and never looked back. Finally, we have Puzzler Collection, and this game is trash. I expected something fun, but what I got was a frustrating, broken mess with non-functional touchscreen controls. This is one of the first times I remember getting pissed off at a game, and it taught me what a truly abhorrent piece of dog shit is. Fuck this garbage. Next group, the pleasant surprises. First is Lego Batman, which I remember really enjoying. Of course, the console version was better, but this was a surprisingly good game that was its own thing. Second, Deal or No Deal. This may seem like crappy DS shovelware, but trust me, I enjoyed it for whatever reason. I might play it again and find that it's much worse than I remember, but my memory tells me that this was a fun game. And finally, the last group, the games I know jack shit about. For all I know, these could have materialized in my collection yesterday, because I only vaguely remember them. This group is comprised of How to Train Your Dragon, Lego Ninjago Battles, and Ghostbusters. I have vague memories of Ninjago being some sort of brawler, but other than that, I don't know anything about these games other than the fact they exist. And that does it for the DS. Overall, this is a decent handheld system, but I much prefer the Game Boy Advance for its better games and more extensive backwards compatibility. And now it's time for the final console of the day, a Nintendo 3DS. I got this system several years after getting my DS, and the backwards compatibility and larger screen made it very hard to go back to the DS Lite, that's for sure. As for the games I own for the system itself, I'm sorry but I don't like most of them. That's not to say the system itself is bad or something, I just dislike a few of the games I played in it. To start off, we've got Super Mario 3D Land. This game is, without a doubt, my least favorite 3D Mario game by a country mile. Super Mario 64 DS was extremely flawed, yes, but at least Super Mario 64 DS wasn't a bad game. 3D Land is one of the most painfully repetitive, boring games I have ever played in my life. It's simply no fun at all, because the level design is so bland, lifeless, and tedious. The controls are all so terrible, with sluggish movement and unresponsive, stiff button inputs. It doesn't control as horrendously and downright insultingly as the Crash Bandicoot games for PS1, but that doesn't mean it handles well at all. It also has one of the worst design decisions I've ever seen in a game, the star coin progression gating system. Jesus Christ, this system is dog shit. You aren't told collecting these once optional coins is mandatory until the third world, when it tells you to fuck off and slog through the boring levels to collect them. The act of collecting them itself is also a pain in the gonads, as you have to deal with the clunky controls and boring levels to get them. The requirements are also far too high, with the last castle needing 100 of the fucking things to be played. Good lord, I can't even begin to describe the immense tedium and boredom I endured just to finish this goddamn train wreck. It is easily one of the most boring games I've ever played, and I actively had to fight to stay awake the whole time. And that really sucks, since this is a fucking Mario game. The series has such fun games in it, so this game being as bad as it is a genuine slap to the face. I will say this, though, it's nowhere near as revolting as the Crash Bandicoot PS1 games, because at least 3D Land has some redeeming qualities, like the music, for instance. Next is Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. This game is a port of the Wii version, and I picked it up because I didn't want to deal with the showhorn in motion controls. The little of it that I played is alright, but nowhere near as great as the first two SNES Donkey Kong Country games. It controls well, looks nice, and has good music, but I find that it's not as engaging as the early titles. Still, not bad, and it's probably my favorite 3DS game so far. And finally, we have Pokemon X and Y. I also own a game called WWE All-Stars 3D, but I haven't ever played it and don't even know where it is. As for Pokemon X and Y, these games were a huge disappointment. After Y2 left me feeling empty, I was hoping that these games would be the ones to redeem the series. And they just didn't. They were even more boring, bland, generic, and not fun than Y2 and Black 2. I was so turned off by them that I stopped about an hour in and haven't looked back since. I even dropped the series as a whole, and gave up hope that it would ever be good again. And that was probably a good choice, considering what the series would become. I haven't touched X and Y since 2014 or so, and I likely never will again. And that does it for the 3DS. Overall, this is a good handheld, but I still prefer the GBA and really only use it for the DS backwards compatibility. And that's it. Yep, that's all the consoles I had to show off. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Just kidding, bitches. Yeah, we're not quite done yet. I may have finished going over the consoles, but there's still one platform left to show off, my PC, both physical and digital games. I could show off Xbox One, but like I said last time, I don't have access to it or its games. So, let's make like open and get this fucker started. So yeah, here's my physical PC games. I haven't played most of these, but I want to go over them anyways. First, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Platinum. This was yet another huge childhood game for me, and is another reason why I consider the 6th generation of games to be the best. It's 6th gen, because it came out in 2004. This game is enjoyable, and has a similar appeal to Animal Crossing. You're able to build something of your own, but it's an amusement park instead of a town. I especially love the custom content, like custom track rides and custom scenery objects, which I've installed tons of. The game doesn't run extremely well in Windows 10, because it occasionally crashes for no good reason and the frame rate becomes pretty dog shit when there's a ton of scenery objects placed, but despite that, this is one of my favorite PC games for sure. If you want to play this game, get the Platinum version, since it includes the 2 expansion packs, Soaked and Wild. I also own the Gold Edition, but I have no idea where I left it, or if I even still own it. Next is a stack of games I haven't played yet. These are all old games, and I have no idea if any of them will run on my Windows 10 machine. In this stack, I have Tom Clancy's Rogue's Tier, a Rogue's Tier mission pack, Tier Hunter and a companion pack for it, Tier Hunter 2, and Delta Force Black Hawk Down. Even if I could run these games, I don't have any interest in them. So, with that, why don't we switch over to my computer itself and show off my digital games? Alright, here we are. First off, I'll show some games I didn't show last time. To begin, we have Minecraft. Oh wait, sorry, I mean Minecraft. Silly me. Anyways, the reason I didn't show this last time was because I actually forgot to. And that's a really huge blunder, because Minecraft is the game I have the most time played in ever, since I got it back in 2012. I must have put thousands of hours into it. It was definitely my favorite video game growing up, and to be honest, it may just be my favorite of all time. I'm not sure about that, though. I love pretty much everything about it, the expansive worlds, the 2 game modes, survival, where you have limited resources, health, and hunger, and creative, where you have infinite items and can just go crazy making anything you want, are both great in their own ways, and the iconic blocky aesthetic has a lot of charm to it. For a game released in 2011, and being publicly available as early as 2009, the scale is still impressive, with worlds that are factually proven to be 7 times larger than the surface of the Earth. My only complaints are that the biome generation lacks variety in any version past 1.6 and that it occasionally crashes, but other than that, this is one of the best video games I've ever played, and it's a must-play for anyone who likes games. Next up, we have Celeste. I haven't actually played this on PC yet, but I did play it on someone else's Nintendo Switch, and it was pretty great. The control was very solid, the levels were extremely challenging but very fair because of the frequent checkpoints, the music was top tier stuff, the graphics are gorgeous, and the story is surprisingly good. A young lady named Madeline climbs the mystical Celeste Mountain, and the quest serves as an allegory for overcoming her personal demons. Trust me, it's much more in-depth than that, but I won't go into such detail, because the video would be way too fucking long, if I did. All in all, Celeste is a great game from my experiences, and it's very high in my backlog list. Next, Garry's Mod. This game is fucking hilarious. It has the same kind of appeal to me as Grand Theft Auto. It's a sandbox, where you get in and do whatever you want. In Garry's Mod, you really can do anything you want, because there's a whole bunch of mods and custom content to get. Admittedly, this game is best played in short bursts, but it can be tons of fun messing around and doing whatever the hell you want. Next, Planet Coaster. This game is easily the best theme park simulation game ever made. Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 is the most nostalgic for sure, but nostalgia lies. Quality doesn't. RCT3 was good, but this game is a huge improvement. The graphics are far better, the restricted grid is con which allows you to go crazy with your coaster layouts, and you don't need to download any custom scenery off the workshop to make good-looking custom supports. The only things I don't like about it are the rampant micro-stutters that happen when you place a lot of scenery. Lining up custom supports with the advanced move can be a pain in the ass, and the fact that OBS absolutely hates it. It absolutely refuses to record it in an acceptable frame rate, but despite those things, this is still the best theme park sim I've ever played. Next, Portal 2. This is another one of the best games on Steam. It's a really creative, fun puzzle platforming type experience, with decent visuals for 2011, a good soundtrack, intelligently designed puzzles that make great use of your portal gun, and an entertaining, well-written story with that signature Valve sense of humor. This is yet another case of the sequel to a game being much better than the original, that's for sure. And next is Sonic Adventure 2. Again, yeah, I own all 3 versions of the Sonic Adventure games, and why wouldn't I? They are both great. I'll be honest, this is probably my least favorite version of this game. Don't get me wrong, it's just as good as the other 2 gameplay-wise, and the HD widescreen is a major plus, but this one seems to have some technical issues. Most notably, it occasionally locks up for a few seconds, the screen flashes black, and then the game resumes. It doesn't happen often, but just enough to get annoying. I'm still glad to own this version, but I'm far more likely to play it on Dreamcast or GameCube when revisiting it. Next, Sonic Adventure DX. This is a great port, but only if you have the better SADX mod. This mod adds widescreen and even allows you to switch to Dreamcast graphics if you want, which I do, because I think they look better. Without mods, this is one of the laziest ports you can find. Like Super Mario 64 in 3D All-Stars, it's not in widescreen, and the graphics are based off of the inferior GameCube visuals, which was the only thing the GameCube version did worse than Dreamcast, mind you. Thankfully, you can still skip cutscenes, so even without mods, it's better than the Dreamcast version, but still, it's quite bare bones without the mods. And next is, what the fuck, Super Mario 64? How is this possible? This game never came out on Steam. Well, you're right. It didn't come out on Steam. That's because it's not an official port. In case you don't know, Super Mario 64 was fully decompiled into C source code sometime last year, and in case you don't know, decompilation means to translate the binary ones and zeros the computer reads to human-readable source code. This allowed for this PC port to be released, and let me tell you, this is easily the definitive version of the game. It runs in full widescreen and the frame drops are a thing of the past. It also requires no setup, you just need the Mario.exe file and you can run it in a single double click. It even has controller support. I still like the N64 version, but this is the version that new players should play, if you can find it online. Next is Team Fortress 2. This game is by far the best multiplayer shooter I've ever played. Hell, it might even be my favorite FPS in general. The game modes like Capture the Flag are really fun, the characters are very entertaining, and the graphics look great for 2007 with a cartoony aesthetic inspired by mid-20th century art. The music is also phenomenal, with great composition and instrumentation. The community support is also some of the best of any game, with plenty of fun custom maps and game modes. In fact, I think most of my playtime in this game was through custom game modes like Death Run. I may have played Minecraft for more time, but I also have hundreds of hours logged in this game. It's an essential Steam title, and it's free to play, so you have nothing to lose. Next, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I haven't played this game very much, because I am not super into multiplayer shooters. This isn't a bad game or anything and can be pretty decent, dumb fun with friends. I just find it boring after a while lol. Oh yeah, and that video, where I slaughter a bunch of chickens is still up, so watch it I guess. If you want lol I don't care, it's an old video. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. So glad. Next we have
No.
next game. What the hell even is this? Next. Right here we have Moonbase Alpha. John Madden. Yeah, I pulled the same joke as last time. Deal with it bitches. Anyway, next up is Portal. This game isn't nearly as good as the second one. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh. This isn't a bad game, I just much prefer Portal 2 for its better graphics, story, and more interesting puzzles. The first Portal is still a good puzzle experience, I just think it's the weaker one of the two. Next, Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics. I only own Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles in this collection, and I haven't really played them. Sonic 3 and K was only a few dollars, while Sonic 2 was actually free. I mostly got the version of 3 and K for the Angel Island Revisited port, and Sonic 2 just because it was free. These versions will come in handy, if God forbid my hardware ever shits the bed, but right now, I don't have any reason to play them, unless I record Let's Plays of the games. Next is Sonic Generations. Like I mentioned earlier, this is how I played this game, because my Xbox 360 copy is screwed up. I already offered my thoughts in the game as a whole, so all you really need to know about this version is that it's a solid port that looks great in full 1080p. Next up is Sonic Mania. I know I'm in for a monsoon of negativity when I say this, but I don't really like this game all that much. Don't get me wrong, it's not a horrible game, unlike certain pieces of shit I've covered in this video. It's a functionally sound game, I'm just not that big of a fan of the core design. They seem to think that everyone liked the classic Sonic games, because they apparently had a million alternate paths, which they really didn't have that many overall, only Sonic CD really did, so they go out of their way to make every stage a confusing maze of intertwining and interlocking pathways that has no sense of flow or direction. Because of this, I find this game rather boring to play, which is in complete contrast to the Genesis Sonic games. Those games were doing nothing but trying to be as good as they could with the resources they had, while Mania is just deliberately and cynically going back to this old gameplay style, because that's what they think people want, trying to make the last 20 or so years of Sonic seem all for nothing and completely ignoring the several good 3D Sonic games, like the adventure games, Heroes, and Generations, that, I'll be quite frank, I personally enjoy more than most 2D Sonic games. Just because a game is good doesn't mean I have to like it, and that's definitely the case for Sonic Mania. If you like it, that's 100% fine by me and I have no problem with that. Just know that this is my opinion and I stand by it. And the final game in my Steam library, Turbo Dismount. I've barely played this one, because it's really only fun in small bursts. It's not a bad game, and can be funny for about 5 minutes, but after that, it kind of loses its luster. I don't think it's really worth buying, because there's not enough content to warrant that purchase, even if it is really cheap. That's it for my Steam library, but we're not done yet. I still have a bunch of stuff to go over. Let's start off with the classic Doom games, which I played through the Crispy Doom source port. First, the Ultimate Doom, or just Doom, originally released in 1993. This game is one of the most iconic first-person shooters of all time, and was the game that made the genre popular. I first played it this year, all 3 of the original episodes in the ultra-violence difficulty, which is the hard mode. And I have to say, this game still kicks ass nearly 30 years later. The shooting is satisfying, the weapons are fun as hell to use, the map design is very intelligent, expansive, and in-depth than most modern first-person shooters, and the controls are spot on, since this port supports mouse look. The graphics are also decent for 1993, and the music is one of my favorite video game soundtracks, being a mix of kick-ass metal and dark ambient pieces. The only things I'm not a fan of are the inability to look up or down, though this is fixed in Easy Doom, and anytime there's invisible demons or pitch black rooms. Otherwise, I'm shocked at how well this holds up today, and every self-respecting gamer owes it to themselves to give it a shot. Can I get it all? Just make sure to get the Doom.log file instead of Doom1.log, since Doom1.log is the shareware version and only includes the first episode. Next, Doom 2, Hell on Earth. I'll admit, I haven't played this one yet, but I want to at some point. The gameplay is thankfully the exact same, it's just that the maps are different and there's some new enemies and weapons. I'm sure it's gonna be a great game just like the first one, but I'm not sure which one I'll end up preferring. For now, just know that this one is near the top of my backlog priority queue. But we're still not done. Now, it's time to look at games that don't run natively on PC hardware emulators. I have a few of these installed, alongside a bunch of ROMs. While I prefer original hardware, I'm a proponent of emulation and consider it an acceptable option for anyone looking to play these old games. In fact, it's probably the best option, since it's free and can be done on any computer capable of running it. It's absolutely essential for game preservation and ensures that every game is readily available to be played by anyone. So, let's go over them, why don't we? Here's my folder of ROM files. I have a bunch of stuff here, like Sonic CD, which I actually played through emulation, because the Sega CD is way too expensive, a few Mega Man games, several Mario games and other Sonic games, Donkey Kong Country, Banjo-Kazooie, Earthworm Jim, and whatever the hell this is, and that's about it for that. Like I said, I firmly believe that emulation is a positive thing, and will never understand how some collectors are so opposed to it. And that's it. Yep, that's my entire game collection. Let's get out of here and wrap this thing up. And that's my whole game collection. Wow, that was a lot, but it was all worth it, because video games are by far my favorite hobby. This collection is also not gonna stay the way it is, I'm always getting new games. This year has been a landmark year in my time collecting this stuff, because I've gotten a truckload of new games and even a brand new console. And I don't plan on stopping anytime soon, I've got so many more games, and even a couple consoles I still want to potentially get my hands on. It may seem weird that I did 2 of these videos in a single year, but trust me, there won't be another one for a long time. I'll probably only do this once a year at most. And there you have it. The end of a crazy fucking year. Despite all the bad shit that's happened in the world this year, this was one of the most fun years for me in terms of videos, and if anyone watched them, I sincerely thank you, and hope my dumbass was able to brighten up a bit of the year. Before we go, I have a sort of channel update. This year, there likely won't be a best of compilation like I've been doing for the last 2 years, since they are a massive waste of time. No one even watches them, and there's just way too much stuff I uploaded this year across my 3 main channels to be able to slap it together in time for the end of December. I was busy with exams early on in this month, and I just don't have the time or energy to crank out a long compilation this year. Don't take this decision as final, because I may end up uploading one, but it's not gonna be anywhere near as long as last year's. That's all. Oh, hey Domino, is there anything you want to say before I go? Okay then. This has been Diamond Miner Studios. Thanks for watching, have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you all later.
Don't criticize. I'm just living by my own feelings.
Bye.